Call to order the Sanborn Regional School District's February 15th, 2017 meeting at 7:10 p.m. Let's go ahead and all rise. Salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, to the community who came out in this current weather conditions, and to the school board as well. Everyone speed safely later. I'd like to go ahead and review the agenda real quick. We're going to add a letter D underneath subcommittee reports for budget committee. Let's do a brief update there, Ms. Fluck. Any other changes, omissions from the agenda? Seeing none, moving on. I'd like to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 1st, 2017 school board meeting. Okay, that's Jan and Nancy. Any errors, omissions, thoughts, discussions relative to the minutes for February 1st, 2017 by the board? Hi, Dr. Brown.
On page 4, I made an error when I spoke about our indicators, and I want to correct that error tonight. I don't make errors often, but it's good to keep in practice, so I want to make sure I have the record straight. On page 4, I said, she went on to say that despite our average class size continuing to trend below state average, that should read, despite our student-to-teacher ratio continuing to trend below state average.
I'm going to have to ask a quick question here. Did you say what you're trying to change it to, or are you saying you'd like to go ahead and go on record that you said something?
I'm going on record as saying that it was actually should have been student-to-teacher ratio. That is correct.
Well, it's correct that you're changing to what you wanted to say, but not what you said.
So what would you like me to do?
No, the minutes
Wait
are...
until the board comment for that?
No, the minutes are, I'm perfectly fine with, technically, yes. So when
Okay.
we review the minutes, it's what we said versus what we wanted to say.
Okay, sure.
Um,
And then there's another typo a little further down where it says, while teaching children as unique self-paced learners has its benefits, but should be stricken. It should just say students also share many unique abilities in common, or many abilities in common, not unique abilities. And then later it says, Dr. Brown suggested in the future, it should say, we have listening sessions with our teachers, so the board hears instead of hear from them. And those are the only minor changes. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Other errors, omissions, so forth at this time? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the minutes for February 1st, 2017? It's all in favor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to go ahead and ask for a motion for the February 1st, 2017 non-public session.
Make motion. Second.
So Jan and Nancy. Any errors, omissions, questions, comments about the February 1st, 2017 non-public? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. P, is that a hand yes? Mr. Broderick?
Sorry. Yes, I'm
Okay, it's
sorry.
unanimous as well. All right, great. The manifests and expenditures are going around for expenditure number 16. Any questions or comments we'd like to discuss? Okay. I saw, Dr. Brown, you had submitted some questions. I thank you very much for those. And we can share those later. Okay. I'd like to move on to public hearing. Article number 14 for Kingston. Again, tonight's one of two public hearings that we have relative to Article 14. The Newton will be next week, the 22nd, and we'll talk more about that later. So I'd like to go ahead and open up the public hearing at 7:15 p.m. for Article 14. Again, this is open to the community and open to the public. This is in addition to, of course, to that of the public comment later. So this got nothing to do with that. Article 14, for all those who are questioning, and the school board, let me bring that up here. Okay. Darn it, my bad. otherwise. Someone want to keep me, there's that music that we need there, Mr. All right. Someone like to see downloads, desktop.
I can read it.
Thank you, Dr. Blake. Yep.
Okay, submitted by petition, Article 14, default budget. Shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 40:14-B to delegate the determination of the default budget to the Sanborn Regional School District Budget Committee, which has been adopted under RSA 32:14? 3/5 majority vote required. Not recommended by the Sanborn Regional School Board. In favor, 6-1.
I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor for questions and comments on this.
Kevin Volk, Kingston.
Come forward if you could, Kevin.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Kevin.
Well, my first question would be, why does this particular warrant article require a public hearing when it's already been presented at the deliberative session?
The law? That's the short answer is the RSA governing this 3214 requires that a public hearing be held in each town in which it's considered. So we have a public hearing that's being done tonight here in Kingston. Next Wednesday
Next Wednesday, 27th.
will be the public hearing for it over in Newton. Essentially to take public comment, to explain any questions that people may have regarding this, and then it's on the ballot for voters to decide.
Other further public, yes?
If I may, Corey, we can leave the public hearing open, move on to other agenda items as well, and then close the public hearing later in the meeting so that people, if somebody comes in and wants to comment, they have opportunity to do that later.
Thanks for expressing that, Dr. Blake.
Is this on? The green light's on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Cheryl Gannon from Kingston. I'm here to speak against this article. I think that the voters should know a little bit about the process that happened this year in the Budget Committee. I was a member of the Budget Committee. And about the people who are advocating that the Budget Committee become the body that determines the default budget. While we were in session discussing the public hearing slideshow and how that should be adjusted for the deliberative session, one of the slides that was included in the public hearing was a detailed or a summary of what the default budget would fund. It included an explanation of how the calculations are made by law. Certain things had to be in their contracts, etc. And then there was a slide that was required by law for the public hearing, which was a summary of what categories the default budget would indeed fund and the amounts that were associated with those in this year's default budget. It was suggested by myself and some other Budget Committee members that that slide remain for the deliberative session. During the January 19th meeting, and you can see the video on this, it's on the website, the response to including that in the deliberative session so that the voters could hear what it was, quote, "It is ridiculous. The voters don't understand it anyway." I want to make this presentation a lot quicker than the last one. It's in 15 different places on the website if they'd like to see it. If this is an indication of the attitude of the people who want to be charged with developing the default budget, I would suggest this is not in the best interest of the district, nor of the voters, who are not being given the benefit of respect and having the default budget explained in a way that they can understand. They need to make a choice between a proposed budget and a default budget. They need to know if they vote against the proposed budget, what is the default budget going to fund? So whoever determines that, it's their responsibility to explain that to the voters. And if it's difficult to explain, well, then it needs to be made in layman's terms, and questions need to be taken on that so the voters understand what they're voting on. That's choice. That's what we have in a democracy. And if the people who want to take charge of this don't feel that that's appropriate to do, I would say that it's not in the best interest of the voters nor the district to have that body take on this responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gannon. Other Representative Kingston for the public hearing comment at this time? Board members?
No, but I do have something I want to say once you finish that. Actually, it's a question I have.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to, seeing none at this time.
No, it's not on this, it's actually on the deliberative session.
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah,
All right, on.
right.
Thank you. All right, as Dr. Blake alluded to earlier, we'll keep the public hearing open. We'll close it shortly before we leave, the normal public session. All right, let's go ahead and get back to where we are.
Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I don't see it on the agenda here, but there were a number of amendments to the warrant articles at the deliberative session, and it's my understanding the school board should now discuss their recommendations, whether they changed them or not, and I don't see it called out here.
It will be underneath the deliberative
So it's
session.
got, okay, that's where you're gonna put
Yeah,
it, okay. All right,
okay.
now that's fine. I wasn't sure if
Yes.
your comments, our comments on the deliberative.
Yep,
Want to make sure we do it.
Correct. All right, moving on from agenda item 7, the default budget, Article 14, public hearing. We'll move over to administrative reports, a discipline presentation. Dr. Blake?
Yeah, there's, over the last couple of weeks, maybe last couple of months, there's been a lot of commentary on Facebook and at different meetings and stuff about discipline, particularly here at the high school. And a lot of misinformation, a lot of inaccurate information. And so what I've asked the administrators to do this evening from the high school is to present to the board about how discipline is approached here at the high school, to give the board a better idea of how we manage the discipline. As we've reported out many times, we've successfully brought down the number of discipline issues over the years significantly by the programming that we have available to our students, the teaming concepts that we employ, and just having a better culture and learning environment for our students. So I asked the administrators to put together a presentation this evening to walk us through how they approach discipline. And this can be part of a bigger conversation, because I know that there's concern that we want to hear from teachers too, and I think that's a good idea. So at some future date, maybe we can have teachers come in as well and join the discussion in terms of how discipline is handled at the high school. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stack, Mr. Trammell, Ms. Hadwin, to walk us through discipline.
Thank you.
And what that looks like here
Yep,
tonight.
nope, thank you. So we've,
Before you get going, do you mind just announcing your position and
yes,
your role
we can do that.
for the community?
Um,
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm Brian Stack, I'm the principal at the high school.
Michael Trammell, Assistant Principal at the high school.
Thank you.
So we're gonna try to, as Dr. Blake said, give you more of a high-level overview of kind of what discipline looks like from the policy level to the day-to-day procedures that we follow as administrators. So we'll tell you that anywhere between 50% to 125% of our day is probably spent dealing with discipline depending on the day. So it certainly is something that consumes a lot of our time. And how we spend that time, of course, is very valuable, and we try to make sure that we're spending that time in a way that's going to bring about the best case scenario and resolve issues and reduce discipline problems as they come up. So,
So
Yep.
Brian mentioned that discipline consumes a lot of our time. However, I will say that over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a significant shift in the types of things that we're dealing with. So we are spending a lot of time on behavioral things, but there are aspects of behavior that we weren't addressing prior that we are now. And so, for example, we spend a lot of time on supporting students with academic behaviors. So students who aren't getting work submitted on time. And there's been a significant shift away from sort of disruptive kinds of behaviors or fighting, and more into promoting positive academic behaviors in students.
So we're just gonna kind of walk through, kind of give you some information, not that you're gonna read it all now, but just some things we want to point out to you so you have them. The first thing that's coming out to you is actually the discipline excerpt from our student handbook, because I'm a realist. I know you don't all go home and read every page of the student handbook, nor do all of our students and parents, but boy, let me tell you, when there's an issue that impacts them, now they come out and they've researched, they've done their homework with the student handbooks. That, what I'm passing out to you is the same information that you see in these. These are our annual handbooks that we put out. It is required by school board policy that we do that annually. And so in that discipline code of conduct, it obviously talks in general terms about our philosophy for discipline. And recognize that our handbook, the philosophy, the procedures, the policies that we follow come directly from things that are school board policies, right? So in some cases, we have to interpret school board policy or make them specific for our school, because the policy might be written generically so that it applies to multiple buildings within the district, right? And there are things, obviously, that aren't covered in school board policy that would be handled at the school level. So all of that gets put together and kind of packaged in a way so that it makes sense to students, it's student-friendly language, it makes sense to parents, it's not the legal jargon that you might find in a policy manual. So you've got overview of how we approach discipline, and then at some point within that document, it starts to get down into more of the nitty-gritty, where we start to talk about, okay, there are certain types of infractions that can happen in the school, and those can be categorized as like a low level, we call them like a level 1 or a level 2 type offense, all the way up to a really significant offense, level 5 or level 6. So within those 6 levels, there are all sorts of types of infractions that might happen. And then under that, there are different types of resolutions that might come as a result of those infractions. There's a misconception that our policy is written, or that our policy should be written in such a way so that if you do this, you will get this. If you do this, you will get this. And I will tell you that that does not work. It absolutely does not work in working with children. A policy is written in such a way so that we have at our disposal an arsenal of tools that we can use with students to try to get the desired result, which is to improve the student behavior, prevent the behavior from happening in the future. So, and that there's a lot of nuances to how we make that work. So that's a document that we wanted you to have. I think what might be best to do at this point, do this, I'll pass them on.
So, can I just have one? Yep. We're gonna pass out some documents to you that are actual, real documents. So I've done my best to white out student names, and if I made a mistake, we ask that you just limit these to the board, because they are issues of confidentiality.
And then we'll take them back at the end of the meeting.
But what Brian was, what we would like to do tonight is have you understand the system behind what we do. If you think of a discipline, you have to imagine that we're dealing with issues that could be something as minor as a student skipping a class, and as significant as student bringing drugs to school, and everything in between.
Want to make sure there's no names, sorry.
I did,
Well,
but
we
I
think so. Sorry.
So the very first step in the system, when there's any kind of infraction, it's either monitored by a teacher and observed by a teacher, or reported to a teacher, or it's observed or monitored or reported to an administrator. And those two things are handled a little differently. What you have in front of you on the top sheet is a referral form. It's a discipline referral form. It does say on top of it that it's confidential. And obviously where it would say student name is where the student name would go. And this is an actual one that was given to me on February 3rd. You see there that there's an expectation right under the yellow highlighting that teachers contact parents. In this case, the teacher noted to me that she contacted the student's mother. And from that point, I will meet with the student. Now, it could be that the student was sent out of class, or it may be not so significant to remove a student from class, but it's something the teacher would like me to address at some later time. So immediately following the discipline referral, and you can see on the back, there are all kinds of boxes we can check and things that we can do. But the very next thing is the student's schedule. And I put that in there just so you can see that when we get a referral, what we do is go to the system, look at the student's schedule, and try to determine when the best possible time is to pull that student from class if they aren't in front of us already. So we'll look at the schedule, determine what period we want to pull them through from. Oftentimes it's first thing in the morning the next day, because if we can get a student right off the bat, we're not necessarily interrupting the next day's lesson. The next page looks like a computer form, because it is a computer form. This is a printout from our Infinite Campus Behavior module. So when a discipline referral comes in, even something as minor as a student refusing to put a phone away and watching a video, that student got a referral form, the student met with me, and after meeting with me, I made an entry into that student's behavior record. What you'll see at the bottom is a little handout where I wrote the teacher's name and just FYI, and I put this in the teacher's mailbox. And that's something that we strive to do on each and every occasion when we receive a referral, so that the teacher can see that we met with the student, that we contacted the parent, and what the outcome was. Historically, being an administrator for as long as I have, that's the one criticism that teachers will say, is that there isn't follow-through. I never know what the result was. And so we take this step so that teachers can know what the resolution was. In this case, if you read it, you'll see that the student was awarded detention. And there's a whole system in place that we have for tracking detentions and how they get recorded. And we have somebody after school and in the office who monitors detention and records it and reports back to us, and we can check off that the student in fact served his detention for that violation. Yes?
So this says incident details, lunch detention to make up time.
Yep. So in this particular case, I took the student's lunch away from the student. A student brought his lunch and had lunch alone in the office. It was a lunch detention in this
Okay.
case. Yep.
So when they have lunch detention, is it the teacher that submitted the, it wasn't in this case, because they had it in the office, but are there times where the teacher that submitted the infraction has to then sit with the student for
Yes.
lunch
Well,
detention?
sometimes the teacher will say, I prefer the student to come with me, because there are teachers that very generously give up lunch to work with students on academics, as well as after school. Teachers always have the option to have students with them after school to make up time, because it's more academic focused.
Teachers also have the option not to refer. They
Handle it
may,
on their own.
they handle it on their own and
Right.
assume consequences on their
Right.
own, obviously.
I guess my one question is if the student's disruptive in class and then the staff member would have to then administer the detention during their lunchtime.
Well, see,
Yeah,
we
If
also
it's
have
a
after-
choice,
we have- we
it
also
would be
have
a
after-school
choice.
detentions. We have after-school detentions also from 2:15 to 3:15. In this case, I believe it was the teacher who said, please give me lunch.
Okay.
Yeah. The next thing in the packet I want to show you is something that's a little more serious. So the first one was, I went to put my phone away. This next one you'll notice, it says in-school suspension program student expectations. This is a form that when a student is given an in-school suspension, there's a process that they have to go through in order to earn their way out of that in-school suspension, and that is an academic process. There's also a guidance counseling process, and so students have to, when they go in-school suspension, they have to collect work to do that day. The guidance counselor goes in and has a counseling session with them and basically says, you know, what do you think landed you in here? What would you do differently? Would you make the same mistake again? They kind of help the student to see they made a bad decision. But it's very much academic focused, so the students have to report to the in-school suspension coordinator what it is that they're going to be working on with their teachers, and the teachers and the coordinator check that off at the end, and they give us this report in the office to say, this student had a successful day, and you can see there's a rubric there about whether or not they followed school rules and completed their academic work, etc. And you can see a little bit of the processing that happens with the guidance counselor, and we ask them to report back on what they thought they should do differently. And then you can see at the very back of that is the discipline referral that went into the Infinite Campus system for that documented. In this case, it was a student who left school without permission. So they were essentially truant from school. The handbook says on the first occurrence, they'll get an in-school suspension, but for subsequent occurrences, we would do out-of-school suspensions. And you can see in this case, it was Ms. Hadwin who entered this. At the very bottom, it says resolution details, and she put a note in there. And this note is really as much, it's for Brian and me, because it's just as likely that in the future, we would deal with this student. And so when we go to Infinite Campus to look for prior incidents, because one of the things that Brian will talk about later is our system is progressive. In other words, if you leave school without permission this time, you'll get an in-school suspension. But if you do it again, the response to that increases, right? So Ann has made a note in this person's file that says another occurrence will result in a 2-day out-of-school suspension, OSS, and loss of parking pass. Phone call was made home. So that note tells Brian and me, hey, this is not the first incident of the student leaving without permission. And so if you should come across a student doing it again, Michael and Brian, you should give this next consequence, right? And then the last piece is a student who skipped a class. Again, referral form. I just happened to pick a couple that happened on the same day, so you notice February 3rd was the day that the student had an issue with the cell phone. Also happens to be the same day the student had an issue with skipping, in this case, forensics FLT. FLT is the focused learning time. It's that time during the day when students can go to honors seminar if they're in an honors class. They can go to an enrichment activity, or they can go to intervention if they need extra support in their class. In this case, the student was signed up for focused learning time, which means intervention. The student had something that he or she owed the teacher. They were supposed to go to class, and they skipped the class. And in this case, teacher again said, missed about 20 minutes, can you give him a lunch detention? Sure. So you'll see again, student schedule, and then the last piece is the entry that's made into the system. I want to talk about the system for just a second, Infinite Campus. In Infinite Campus, there are a lot of data fields. You're just seeing the bare bones. It can take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour to put in a discipline referral, particularly if it's something that's significant. If we had a student that got into a fight and we have lots of witness statements to enter, or it's a significant, these happen to be relatively short. And in this report, you're seeing just a few data fields. But the data fields you are seeing are important. Where it says event 1, cut class or advisory, that is a drop-down menu. Every possible infraction that we have in our system is a drop-down. So if it was a weapons violation, we would actually drop down the menu and click weapons violation. The reason why that's important is at the end of the year, when we report our discipline statistics to you and to the state of New Hampshire, we get those reports from the system, and the system can only generate accurate reports if there's consistency in the way that they're entered. So the way to make sure that everything's entered consistently with the correct, I guess, field.
The CRDC report.
Is to be able to select those fields. So when we tell you at the end of the year that there were X number of suspension days, or X number of in-school suspension days, or there were 4 drug and alcohol incidents, or whatever the numbers are, those come directly from the system, and we can only pull those out with 100% confidence because we know that we're putting everything into the system and we can draw reports out from that. Does that make sense? So that's the system behind how teachers report, how we work with students, how we look at the code of conduct to assign a consequence. There are two things that we're going to talk about. There is the traditional code of conduct that you see there. We also, over the last couple of years, have developed a Justice Committee, which is Ann will talk about at some point.
You have
The
a question,
Student goes to class, 10 minutes, he's disruptive, teacher tells him calm down, and finally teacher says go to the office. Okay, he goes to the office, you spend 15, 20 minutes with the student, there's another half hour of class. Boy, where's the student go?
It all depends. So we have several options, right? There are times when teachers send out a student to the office and say, look, Michael, if you can get the student back in the right frame of mind to rejoin the class, send them back, I want them back. He's gonna miss something important. So I'll work with the student, and if I feel like the student is ready to go back, I'll ask the student, can you go back? And then we'll bring the student up to the teacher, and we'll do a little mediation in the hallway. And if I'm convinced that the student's gonna be productive, then I will allow that student to reintegrate. If the student can't reintegrate, we have a couple of options. If there's just a short amount of time, I may sit with them in my office and continue talking. I may send the student's parent an email while he or she is with me. The other option we have is the in-school suspension or planning room. If it looks like the student isn't going to be able to reintegrate, and sometimes kids will tell you, I'm having a really bad day today, Mr. Trammell. I don't think I can stay in class today. Then we look for the next best alternative for that student to succeed academically. So they may be in the planning room all day. They may be in there for an hour. It may be, however long they need to get themselves back into that right frame of mind. But there's always a conversation between the teacher, the student, and the administrator before we return a student back to class.
I think it's wonderful that the opening remark on this in-school suspension program, student expectation, is welcome to the Sanborn Regional High School's planning room.
Well, and there's the interesting thing there is the planning room is new to us. We've had in-school suspension, but the planning room is used for more than just in-school suspension students. So if you walk in and you saw there were 6 students there, you cannot assume that those kids are in there for in-school suspension. She does tutoring during the day. There are all sorts of reasons why kids go in there now. So we call it planning room. Some kids might be there for in-school suspension. Some might be there for a quiet place to take a reading. Some might be getting tutoring.
Good.
So before we get to the restorative justice piece, there's one other thing I just wanted to share with you all. So let's talk about what happens when a student gets suspended out of school. So I will tell you that our goal, quite honestly, is to have kids suspended out of school only when absolutely necessary. Unless it was some kind of a safety violation or breaking the law of some kind, severe disrespect, something like that, we really want the students in school because there's nothing worse than removing a child from their academic environment, withholding education from that student that we could do to a student. So legally, the 3 of us have permission from you all to suspend students for up to 10 days. Dr. Blake is the superintendent of schools, has the ability to suspend students for an additional 10 days. And anything that goes beyond 20 days, you as a board would have to take action. And many of you have participated in those sorts of hearings for students over the years. So students can get suspended from anywhere to 1 to 10 days. The document that you got that may also be in the back is sort of our boilerplate. What does a suspension letter actually look like? So when a student gets suspended from school, there are several things that go along with that. Obviously, we brought the parent in for some kind of a meeting to talk about why the student was getting suspended from school. We've included other people in that process along the way that may be paired with their educational program in some way. So a guidance counselor, if they have an IEP, then their case manager, special education case manager. If they're a Fremont student, we have to notify the Fremont superintendent. Dr. Blake receives all of these notices as the Sanborn superintendent. There can be other people, depending on the situation, other administrators, other adults that get notified. The student has suspension time. They, many times, have some sort of a re-entry meeting before they can come back to that school. Might be a re-entry meeting with the principal, might be a re-entry meeting with the superintendent, depending on the infraction, depending on that progressive discipline piece. And I'll give you a for example in a minute on that. And then the other thing is there might be other additional meetings that have to happen. So if a student legally, let's say that a student is on an IEP plan and they're suspended from school, we start a clock. If they reach 10 days of suspension, it could be for a single incident or it could be for a period of incidents. Once they've hit that 10th day, we're required to have what's called a manifestation meeting for that student to take a look at what happened, whether or not it's connected to their disability, and if there's anything else that the school needs to put in place for that student. Because suspended or not suspended, we're legally obligated to provide them with educational services throughout. So these are all things to keep in mind. Let me give you a for example of a typical student suspension that, I mean, there are the obvious ones: a student brings drugs to school or is involved in some kind of a physical altercation or something like that. Those are the obvious ones. But there was one that Dr. Blake and I had the other day, actually. It was a student who was suspended for 5 days for leaving school without permission. So this is a good example of progressive discipline, because that student, since I've been working with them at the beginning of the year, the first time that was an issue, they received multiple after-school detentions for it. The second time that was an issue, there was an in-school suspension. The third time that was an issue, their parking pass was taken away for a period of time, and they received a letter that if they brought their school to the property, we had the right to tow it at their expense, right? The next time, they received out-of-school suspension time, and they reach a point where they're before Dr. Blake, because I've now run out of options and ways that I can help them, and he's got more tricks up his sleeve than I have because of his title of superintendent, or because he's a nice guy. I don't know. But, so, you know, this speaks again to, we pull out the tool that we believe is going to resolve the issue with the student, mitigate the problem, prevent future occurrences of that kind of behavior. And that can be a little different for every student. Student doesn't drive to school, holding their parking pass doesn't really do you any good. If a student has absolutely no means to get home at the end of the day, you can try to assign them an after-school detention all you want, but if the parent is going to call you and say, I physically have no way to get my child, they cannot walk, you have to put them on the bus. I mean, whether we like it or not, after-school detentions aren't on the plate. They're just not an option as something that we can use. So that's a good segue, because several years ago, we did one of our culture surveys with the staff and students at the time, looking for ways to improve our school culture. And one of the things that came out of it was looking at a restorative justice model. And that's something that Ms. Hadwin has been working on.
Before you go there, some of the banter on Facebook over the last couple of months, why do we go to these lengths? Why don't we just throw these kids out? How do you react to that?
I mean, denying a student an education is the most severe thing you can, give to them. And I guess I would throw some statistics at you. And I would say, Dr. Blake, that a student without a high school graduation, statistically, will live 10 years less than a student with a high school diploma. A student without a high school education will face a far higher incidence of incarceration. Our jails are filled with high school dropouts. A student without a high school education will suffer from greater morbidity, all kinds of different illnesses, heart disease, cancer, you name it. The statistics are out there, the difference in quality of life. And so we are condemning a student to a pretty rough life if we don't educate them. So to throw a student out is severe. Now, with that said, we have done just that in some cases, and you know this and the board knows. There are some instances There are 4 reasons why a student can be permanently removed from a school. The big 4: drugs and alcohol, weapons, violence, and what's called persistent disregard for the reasonable rules of the school. That's how the law states it. So persistent disregard for the reasonable rules of the school is the kid that's habitually breaking rules. They may be minor, but they're just a nuisance and not taking their education seriously. The others, drugs, alcohol, weapons, and violence, are doozies, right? And so we have brought students, in the 7 years we've worked together, 5 or 6 kids to the board for expulsion. So when we do feel like it's in the best, I guess the way that it was once described to me by a colleague was, there are times when you have to consider what's in the best interest of the students, plural, versus the best interest of the student, singular. So in other words, when that student's right to an education is infringing upon the rights of others to receive an education,
Right.
that's where you have to draw the line. And so on those occasions when we have seen that, we have absolutely brought to the board students for expulsion.
But I will, and I'll add 2 things to that. And I use this catchphrase a lot with people that ask that very question. You might be able to expel a student from a school, but you can't expel a student from a school community. You know, there's still, if a student is not engaged with us during the school day, they're sitting at home. They're on social media. They're hanging out with their friends after school, on the weekends. We haven't removed the student from the school community. We've simply taken them out of the building, but we haven't solved the problem. So that's an add-on to what Mr. Jamel said. The other thing is escaping me, so it'll come back.
One other thing I'll just point out too is that when you look at the numbers, if you're simply just looking at the numbers of infractions and the types of infractions, it doesn't tell you anything about the student. And most of our students are really nice kids. They make bad choices sometimes, and we feel that what we do in the office is we're working on educating them in a different way to try to make better choices. But I've said this before, that our kids don't come to school with a plan to be disruptive. Today, I'm really gonna drive my English teacher crazy, or I'm gonna, do whatever to get kicked out of class. They come with baggage, and for the most part, they are really good kids.
I had a brief conversation with Michael today in the cafeteria, and Michael may not have realized this, but I was the only administrator in the room, and there was one other adult in the room with 400 students.
That's how it is every day,
This
for the
place
most part.
is drastically different than it was 7 or 8 years ago, where we would have had an army of teachers and administrators in that room because we would have been concerned about the behavior. It is so, this building is so peaceful and productive in comparison to where it was. So for folks who feel like discipline is a concern, I want to reassure you that not only do we have a system in place that's working very well, but we invite you to come in and walk through our classrooms with us and walk through our hallways with us, and you will be amazed. There was a woman in the cafeteria today when Michael came in to visit me. I'm not sure if you saw her. She's from Empire Beauty School. And it's very common for us to have a couple of college admissions officers in the CAF every day, or a military recruiter, and today it happened to be Empire Beauty School. And she said to me, "Are you alone in here?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "How many people are here?" I said, "I don't know, 350, 400. And she said, "I've never seen a group of students like this. They're just sitting and eating lunch and talking." That's pretty much what life is like at Sanborn today. It wasn't always that way.
So that's during the common time. It's also been talked about that teachers are afraid or don't bother to make referrals to the office for either because they don't feel like they're gonna get things done, meaning the students are gonna receive consequences, or that there'll be backlash somehow on the teacher.
Well, and that's a shame that anybody would feel that way, because as Michael demonstrated, that everything is documented, there's always some kind of consequence or follow-through. I think what sometimes people may be referring to is an expectation that a behavior may change, and that's our hope, but that's not always the case. So sending a student to the office and thinking we're gonna fix that kid, and that they're gonna be, a great student from here on out and have no more issues is probably not realistic. But something is always done. And it's also, it starts at the classroom level, developing relationships with kids. one of the things that we worry about sometimes is when a teacher does take that step to send a student to the office, we always say they've given us the power. Now, we're the ones developing that relationship with the student, solving the problem and working through it with that student. The teacher didn't have the opportunity to do that.
Nancy?
But to your point, Dr.
Nancy,
Blake,
you-
recognize
Okay.
too,
Deal.
this year, almost 20% of our staff is new.
Mhm.
Okay, and now, of that 20%, are they all brand new, fresh out of college, new to no, but a lot of them are. And there's certainly a learning curve for any teacher in how they approach classroom management. It's a whole other aspect of our job and the job of the other teachers in the school is to help mentor and train younger staff on classroom management skills. So that's obviously an ongoing topic for sure. And definitely we're seeing more of that this year than we have in the 2 prior years. And it could be a lot of reasons why turnover was higher this year.
We have a lot of conversations with teachers when they don't send a student out. And you might hear about something and say, well, why didn't you send that student out? They should have come to the office. We should have had an opportunity to process with them rather than just letting it go and writing up a referral. So we do have those conversations. And when we're working with new teachers, we kind of tell them the rule of thumb is if you cannot get through your lesson because of student behavior, or other students cannot learn because of student behavior, a student's behavior, that student needs to be removed from the classroom. We don't expect teachers to have to put up with that level of disruption, and that's just a general rule of thumb.
We also see kids, it's kind of interesting, we see kids referring themselves, which is pretty interesting. A kid will be in the office and will say, Brian, what's going on? What class do you have right now? Well, I was in Miss Haddon's class, but, I got so mad at John because I had to get out of there, Mr. Tremont. I knew if I came down and talked with you, I wouldn't do anything or say anything that I shouldn't do or say. And so they'll come down and process with us, and we'll try to get them back. And that's a great sign that they trust us and that they know that, they're self-aware.
Well, they're
which is,
self-aware, exactly, yeah,
important.
managing their own
Right.
behavior.
Do the students start each year with a clean slate?
No, and that's important to note. So if you get
Good
into a
answer.
fight.
Was that clear enough?
If you get into a fight your freshman year and you're suspended for 3 days, or 3 to 5 days is what's in the policy, right? So 5 days. And you get into a fight your sophomore year, now it's a second offense.
Okay.
You get a 10-day suspension and a meeting with the big guy.
And when they become eligible for parking, is that taken into consideration,
Oh, yes.
what they have against
And
them?
attendance and a whole bunch of other things. Well, one of the things we believe strongly is that students who can't demonstrate good attendance, particularly in the morning, shouldn't have the privilege of driving, because the bus comes every day at the same time and delivers students to class on time. And so we'll oftentimes see a student who stops taking the bus and drive, will start coming to school late. The very first thing you do is pull a parking pass. If you can't use that pass responsibly and get to school on time, you should ride the bus. It comes on time every day.
Can you pull my wife's parking pass? Because my daughter's late awful lot. Because of that. Between my grandmother and I'm being serious. If she misses that bus, she's late.
It's
Anyways,
sticky with siblings,
and
where it's
I'm-
the older sibling driving.
I'm being serious. I'm like, up. Anyways,
Easy.
I wasn't That's a good example of self-referring.
I do have a question. Going back to conflict resolution, do the students in all grades have an opportunity to participate in classes for help with conflict resolution? When I think conflict resolution, obviously at the younger age, they're going through, I think a discipline is one thing, but there's actually also the whole myriad of help, and behind the scenes, like what the root of the challenge here, again.
They do some of that in the freshman wellness class.
Okay.
We have our formal process that I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes.
Okay.
But we also really try to do that in the office with kids, is kind of get to the root of the problem, have the students, as much as they're willing to take ownership for their piece of it, because we think that's really an important part of them learning how to be responsible adults and be good citizens, and then bring that back to the teacher. And as kids get older, a lot of times they do that on their own, and when I talk about our justice committee, it really is more kids in the younger grades that need help with that. But by the time kids are, they're juniors and seniors, they kind of know when they make a mistake and they know what they need to do to make it better with that adult.
We don't have, So some schools have like a formal peer mediation program.
True.
We do not have that. And that has come up as a question over the years in different formats. Is this something that maybe we could benefit from? Should we look into it? It's never been something that we pursued, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad idea.
Okay.
And we could look into it. Yeah.
Tammy
That's
had a
okay.
comment,
Good.
but I know you want to get to your justice.
No, I want to listen to what she
Yeah.
has to say first, yeah.
The other comment that I saw kicking around was that admin is afraid of discipline because of parent backlash. Do we get pushback from parents, and how do we address that?
To be honest with you, it's difficult. When you're going to suspend a student for a lengthy period of time, it's uncomfortable. You are giving a student the harshest consequence you can do, and if you believe as we do, that education is critical to somebody's life, withholding that education is difficult, and it's a tough conversation to have with parents, but we have it all the time. And we've gotten pretty good at talking with parents about the importance of separating students who have inappropriate behaviors for a period of time so that they can reintegrate to the community with a fresh start.
Most parents are very understanding, they really are.
I guess maybe that, I think that's more related to, because I've heard comments about that. Not when it comes to suspending, because normally that's a pretty cut and dry issue most of the time as to why there is a suspension. When you send out, looking at your reports, the discipline report, and there's an email to a parent or there's a phone call to a parent, I guess I would wonder, what is the kind of feedback that you get? Is there an exchange with parents? Do you get into a debate, the whole thing with the phone? You should take the phone away. I've heard comments, why don't you have the little shoebox at the front of the classroom and have the kid put their phone in and have them take it out when they leave?
Because it's
Well, I
a
shy away from
discretion
that
at the
because
student.
Well,
As soon as a phone goes missing,
Well, and I know that.
who's paying for that phone?
I know that. That's,
And the teachers don't want that
And
on
for
their
the most part,
conscience.
parents
I
have
don't
paid
know.
for the phone and paid for
I-
the service.
Right.
And so they can take the phone and leave it at home,
Yeah.
and they can cut off the service, or they can limit the service during the day.
So Tammy,
And
one,
there is one, well, we have a couple of students actually that have, their parents have arranged that they leave their phones certain places in the building, like in the main office, or with a particular administrator, and the student comes in and leaves it there. But, there are also parents, plenty of parents that are the worst offenders, as far as texting their kids during the day,
Yes.
calling their kids
Yes.
during the day, and then the kids are in a bad spot because they've been sent to the office, and they're saying, but my mom called, and I had to
Yeah.
pick up the phone, and the teacher said, get out of the room, because you're on the
Right.
phone."
I am as well.
right.
You know, and it happens.
I
My
I guess
first
that's the
thing-
feedback, though, that I hear from people, so
One
I'm
of the
just
tricks that I
bringing it
learned
to the
my
discussion
first-
here.
One of my first year as an assistant principal here, I had 1 year the privilege to work with Bert Noyes. You knew Bert Noyes,
Mhm.
some of you knew Bert. You might have known Bert at North Andover too,
Yeah, I
right?
know,
So,
yeah.
so Bert,
I knew Bert.
first trick
Yeah.
he taught me was when you're calling a parent about a student, you have the student in the room. You put the phone on speaker.
Mhm.
It's not a conversation with you and a parent, it's a conversation with you, the parent, and the student.
Mhm.
And that has stuck with me ever since.
Yeah.
There's very few times that I don't take that approach, that the student sits right there, and we hash it out together, because we all have to be on the same page.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I want to, if I, I
Mm-hmm.
want
Yeah.
to wrap up the suspension piece, but I do want to talk about one thing that we neglected to bring with us, and it's a sample of a different form, and it's called a Safe Schools Report. So I want to talk a little bit about Safe Schools Report before we get into the Justice Committee. There are certain infractions which we are required by law to report to the local police agency. So the state statute says that we must have what's called a memorandum of understanding with our local agency, which we do. It's a written agreement between the district and, in this case, at Sanborn Regional High School, it's the Kingston Police Department, that specifies if any of these incidents happen in your building, in your school, they must be reported to the local police agency. And they're the types of things you can imagine, anything that would be breaking the law, weapons, violence, drugs, alcohol, criminal threatening. And the reason I want to mention this is, I've heard in the community, and it drives me crazy, and I don't know how to combat it, that we sweep things under the rug, and we don't report on things. And the reason I want to address that is when I hear that, I want people to understand the accusation you're making because we are required by law to report these things. There isn't a single incident that we're required to report by law that we don't report. And so there's a separate form that when a student is suspended for a serious infraction, parents get that letter, but the police department gets a form called a Safe Schools Report that we file in conjunction with Rick Terrio, who's our school safety officer. And that report holds the weight of a police criminal report. It's just as if a police officer wrote that report. It goes to the police department, and at that point, the police department can act with discretion on whether or not they want to follow up on it or not. But if the police department decides not to follow up on it, has nothing to do with the school district. Once that report is filed, the police can use their discretion to either pursue charges or not pursue charges, depending on whatever investigation they do. So if you ever hear that the high school is sweeping things under the rug, please send somebody to us, because we can show them, and I believe that there are some Safe Schools report that are probably open to the public, particularly if it's a student of age 18 or not. I would imagine that that's a public record. So if you believe that we're not reporting things, I would encourage you to contact the Kingston Police Department. They're in our building almost every day. Sometimes they just come in to join us for lunch, or they're out in the parking lot monitoring the exit and entrance during the day. Ask the Kingston Police Department. We work with them hand in glove.
We also have a radio system. They listen to everything we're talking about. So, because there have been times where we've been dealing with an internal issue, using our radios to talk about it, and suddenly we noticed that they decided to start circling the parking lot, simply because if it rose to the level where we needed them, they would already be here. So it's a great relationship to have with them.
So with that should put the suspension piece to bed, and we'll talk a little bit about Justice Committee.
There's forms coming around.
The form that you handed out earlier, the packet,
Yeah, we
those
want to-
those need to be collected back,
Thank you, yes.
because there are addresses on them.
I was gonna ask
So, yeah.
for those back.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that was why we didn't pass them out, so. The alternative would have been to make up fake information, but we really wanted to see.
Why do you want to do that? You get,
Well, no, I mean, we wanted to see like a real example.
I mean,
Alternative facts, not fake. Alternative facts. That's what we
I handed
call them
mine
these
to-
days.
it could
I
be
went that
true.
way.
It could have been true in the past. So
I get that.
our Justice Committee started, as Mr. Stack said, about 4 years ago. This was an effort to improve
Justice Committee.
not just discipline, but really it was our school culture. And one of the things that, I don't know if you picked up on when you were looking at some of the discipline referrals, and Mr. Simone talked about, that there are times when students get in trouble, they come to the office, we provide a consequence, but yet then they have to go back to the class and face that teacher, and whatever that underlying issue or that bad feeling maybe that was the result of the discipline, that hasn't been addressed. And so that's what we are really looking to do with our Justice Committee. So the first form I want to have you look at is the discipline referral form. So this is not a real case, but it's based on something that
could be.
could be. One of the things that we do with our Justice Committee students is we have them work on mock cases. So this is a mock case that the kids would run through. And they'll do a number of mock cases before they actually handle a real case. But the general idea behind the Justice Committee is that it is a restorative model. It's not about being punitive or retribution. It's about bringing balance back to the community. So somebody has been harmed. There is somebody who's willing to take responsibility for causing that harm, and they want an opportunity to make it right. So kind of the way it works, I'll take you through kind of this process. But in this case, if you're looking at the discipline referral form, a student gets in trouble. They're either sent to the office or there's a referral form that's generated. The administrators will meet with that student, and if certain conditions are met, then that student can have the option to go before the Justice Committee. Again, the number one thing that we're looking for is that student wants to do this. They feel like I've done something wrong, and yes, I would like an opportunity to make it right. So the Justice Committee students will actually get this discipline referral form. Although this one has names in it, typically we don't include the name, so the kids just have an idea of what happened, but not necessarily who they're seeing. All the kids that participate have been trained, and every year they have to sign a confidentiality form. So they understand that there's an important role here in student discipline. So, you don't talk about Justice Committee outside of Justice Committee. It's kind of like a secret society. If there's any additional information that the students might need, if it's an ongoing issue, if the student has had, kind of the same repeat pattern, if an administrator has tried different tactics, then maybe that's on there. Sometimes we include what the handbook policy would be, or what the handbook consequence would be, so the kids just have an idea of kind of, what they're dealing with here. So once that's been established, the student, let's say I'm working with a student, and they say, yeah, I absolutely want to go bring this to the Justice Committee. We schedule a hearing. We actually have 3 different Justice Committee groups that work independently with different faculty advisors. So we kind of look at the next group that's about to meet. I'll contact the advisor and say, let the kids know that we have a real case coming up. I will give the next form here. There are 2 forms for the people that are involved. So one says responsible party notice of hearing. So this is what the student who's responsible, we don't call them, the bad guy, the bad kid. They're just the responsible party. They've done something that, created some harmful situation that needs to be repaired. So I give this to them, and we kind of talk through the process. I ask them to go through the worksheet so that they know what to expect when they go to the hearing. Hearings are not confrontational, so the kids know that the purpose is your peers are going to help you work this out. They're not judging you. You've already said, I made a mistake. They're simply there to help. And I always tell them, and this is true, that we have members of our Justice Committee who've actually gone before the Justice Committee. They use the process themselves. So anyway, they'll fill this out. They have the option of bringing a supporter with them. So sometimes it's just intimidating for kids to go and sit in front of their peers and talk about what they've done, especially if it's their first time or they don't know that much about it. So often kids will bring a friend. It could be a guidance counselor, it could be another teacher. So we set the meeting, they work out the form, that piece is set, and then I will talk with the person who's affected. So that's the second form. Very often it's a teacher, but not always. It could be another student, it could be a group of students, it could be a sixth grade. We've had that happen before, depending on the situation. I will encourage them to participate. If it's not possible, we'll still have a hearing, but in the case of, let's say it's a teacher, and we do run these during FLT time, which is that flexible time, so if we have enough leeway and that teacher can kind of farm out those students, then they will participate. More often than not, we do have a teacher there, because that's a really important thing, the result of the other students. That's a very important piece of it, is that that person who's affected, they're the one that's been harmed, and we want them to have a voice. So it's unusual for them not to participate, but sometimes they don't need to. So I ask them to do the same thing, to kind of fill this out so they have an idea of what's going to happen. And then very often we use this room for the hearings. We sit in a circle. So again, it's very, it's non-confrontational. We're all sitting together, working this out, and the circle kind of represents that, the idea of unity. We have, it's all student run. So we have a student that acts as the facilitator, and they have a script that they go through. It starts with introductions. So just to kind of set everybody at ease, they'll introduce themselves. This is the grade that I'm in. These are activities that I participate in school. Everybody will kind of go around and say their piece. And then the facilitator will, along with the jurors, run through a series of questions. So they'll ask, tell me what happened, what were you thinking, why did you do this, get their backstory, so that student has the opportunity to say, here's what was going on with me this day. Here's why I acted that way. And there's always a story. So the kids really appreciate that opportunity to kind of tell their story. If there is a supporter, then sometimes the supporter will also speak to whatever the action was. And then we hear from the person affected. And a lot of what we want to hear from that person is, how did that make you feel? What can we do? What can this person do to kind of make things right? So after that piece of the discussion happens, then the group starts talking about outcomes. So we don't talk consequence. It's not a punishment. It's, again, what can we do to make things right? And the kids actually have their own handbook that they can refer to that has all kinds of different ideas depending on infraction. Sometimes they get really creative and something will just come to someone. Or sometimes the person who's affected will say, here's what I want. And sometimes it's just, I just want an apology. Or, you know, you wrote on the desks in my room, I want you to come after school and get to know me a little bit and clean up my desks. So very much we want whatever the outcome is to not just, you know, make the person affected feel better and repair that relationship, but sometimes there's something that really needs to be fixed in the school, kind of, you know, put back so that, you know, we've kind of rebalanced our community. So once everyone has agreed to the outcome, then it becomes formal and everybody has to sign off. We agree to do this, and then we schedule a follow-up, usually for about a week later, where the faculty advisor and the facilitator student will meet with the two parties to make sure that the outcome has been met. It almost always has. There have been times where the outcome was not completed, and interestingly enough, the couple of times that happened, it was because the student either didn't know how to complete the outcome or was unable. And our Justice Committee kids in the past had actually worked with that student to make sure that the outcome was completed. So in one case, the student actually had to do some research and write a paper, and the student was really having a hard time with that. So our Justice Committee facilitator sat with them and got the assignment done with them. So it usually, almost always, with the exception of maybe one case that I can think of, where the whole process was kind of aborted midway through. And that can happen too, because we always say to the kids, if at any point you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But really almost, you know, 100% of the kids, when they're done, feel really positive about it, because, you know, they'll leave with a smile on their face. That teacher's not upset with me anymore. I know that I screwed up and I had an opportunity to make things better. But it also was a lesson for them moving forward, because eventually we want them to get to the place where they behave a certain way in class or in school, they take ownership of it, and then they know what they need to do to make things better. It's also great skills for our kids who participate in the Justice Committee to develop, because they learn about, you know, collaboration and working together and solving problems and what it means to be part of the community. So, I mean, it's a very, very positive part of what we do as far as discipline goes, I think. So that's it in a nutshell.
And if I could just add one unscripted piece, since we happen to have a student sitting back here who participates on Justice Committee, if you're willing, Abby, do you want to just add any thoughts about what your experience is participating as a student in it?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I think are really cool, especially about the Justice Committee, is the script. So the script has been a process, and I remember sitting down I think I joined my sophomore year, and we sat down, and the script was one of the first discussion topics that we sat down and talked about, because we did not want it to be a piece of paper that you recited off of. We wanted it to be a conversation. So we have worked really hard on making it so when the students come in, or when the responsible party and all of them come in and sit down, it's a conversation. It is not a slap on the wrist. So everyone, you can tell that the nervous energy that they come in with leaves almost instantly. It's a small group, everyone's kind of calm, and all the practice hearings that we do, we have people act as a responsible party. We sit down and we take on the roles. So we are sitting in the chair where we're getting asked these questions as to why did you do this? So we have empathy for the people sitting in those chairs over there. And so there's just this huge amount of respect, and it's a really great program to be a part of, and it really teaches you how to use empathy in regular day-to-day life. So yeah, it's enough. Thank you.
So questions for us, or Abby, if you want to.
I have questions.
Yeah.
So how often is it student to student that come to this, or student to faculty?
Justice Committee?
Yeah.
More often student to faculty, and one of the reasons for that is that a lot of the student issues that we have to deal with more like a personal conflict that are better resolved in mediation with a guidance counselor or
Gotcha.
sometimes with an administrator that we don't, it's not really something we're gonna solve in a 40-minute Justice Committee
Right.
hearing.
And again, unless that goes back to that peer mediation model,
Right.
Yeah.
that would be
Right.
a different type of training,
Yeah.
different model
Yeah.
for that.
Exactly.
So this is usually a student with an issue from a classroom or a faculty or a staff member incident or
Yeah,
something.
Or it could be something they did around the school, like
Gotcha.
So there might not be, it might just be it's our school community that was
Right.
harmed and not necessarily a particular
And
person.
how many would you say, how often does this committee meet? Like how many incidents or goes to
The
this
committee
group?
meets more than they actually have hearings. constantly meeting and they're
Training.
mock hearings
Yeah.
and preparing, because there is a lot of preparation. I mean,
Yeah.
the kids know this is serious business if they're dealing with student discipline, so you can't just join the committee one day and see anything
Right.
the next day. So it's
Right.
definitely a process. But overall, I mean, I would say maybe we get a dozen in a year.
Okay.
So it's not like it's something that we do all the time. And again, in order for it to be something that the Justice Committee would hear, it has to meet certain conditions.
Mhm.
So like there has to be a harm that needs to be repaired. So for example, a student that is upset about something that happened before class and it has nothing to do with the teacher that they're with that particular period, but they're upset and like Mr. Trammell said, I can't be here, and they go walking out of class. Well, leaving class without permission is an infraction, but that teacher wasn't necessarily harmed. They're calling the office saying, I'm just concerned about that student. That's not something that we would necessarily take to the Justice
Right.
Committee.
Right.
So it, again, it has to meet those conditions. And I, again, would say that it's more the younger kids that benefit most, where, again, some of our older students are kind of like, yeah, I did that, and I'll go apologize to the teacher, and I'll do whatever they want me to do to kind of make this better, and they usually do, when they follow up.
Abby, you have a comment?
Yeah, so there's this one practice hearing that we've done a couple of times, the times that I've done it, and there are these two students, one of which vandalized the painting or something, and the other one, they painted the painting. And so a couple of solutions that we came up with were the student who vandalized the painting had to buy art supplies and help them recreate the painting. So that's the type of stuff that we typically do, so yeah.
And I will say that the real life ones that the students hear, I'm always curious if I was involved in submitting the referral to the justice. So when a student has some sort of disciplinary infraction, the first thing that Brian Ann and I do think is, should this be something we handle through the traditional system? Or is this a good case for the Justice Committee? So we can refer a discipline and referral to the Justice Committee. And I'm always curious to hear what the outcome was. And without question, I'm always blown away at what the outcome was. And oftentimes it's something I never would have dreamed of to repair that damage. So I just think it's amazing. I think we will get to the point where it's used a lot more to resolve disputes. And I just think Ann is not going to toot her own horn, but I will tell you that the model that she's built has taken years to build. Tons of research, training with kids, training with teachers, and it's an amazing program.
And there aren't that many high schools that have that
Right.
kind of a model.
Right.
We've tried
I
to
want
go
to,
surprise.
Jan,
Given-
you.
Given our model of supervision and evaluation of teachers, is there any reason why teachers wouldn't or would be afraid to report issues to the office?
Well, our supervision and evaluation model is very much a coaching-based model. And so we encourage collaboration and problem-solving as part of a partnership. And I can only speak for I work very closely with the sophomore experienced teachers, right? So there are about a dozen of us that work together. And Ann works very closely with 15 or 16 of the freshman learning teachers. It's not an issue when the freshman team or the sophomore team. I think our teachers are in constant contact with us. And I can't speak for the larger body, I just know that the people that I work with most closely, we're in communication on a constant basis. I'm getting text messages. The issues don't always come in the form of a referral. Sometimes a teacher shoots me a text and says, hey, Michael, can you find so-and-so? He went to the nurse and he's been gone for too long. All day long, emails, text messages, referral forms. So from my perspective, I don't see any sense that teachers are concerned. And it may just be that I work with a subset of teachers that,
Yeah, but there's another element that we didn't really speak about tonight too, that I think goes counter to that argument or potential concern. So we've talked a lot at previous meetings about how our teachers work in teams.
Mhm.
And a lot of what they do is in teams, and they're part of what's called a professional learning community, a PLC team. Well, one of the standing items that almost all of our PLC teams have, it might be 5 or 10 minutes at every meeting or every other meeting, is to talk about student issues. So, in other words, we're all teaching different classes, but we all have Jan in our class, and Jan is being disruptive in Michael's class, and now I'm seeing it in my class, Ann's seeing it in hers, and there's an opportunity in that PLC team to have a little discussion about Jan and what everybody's seeing, and the guidance counselor can weigh in on Jan and what she might be able to do. And remember, there's always an administrator attending those PLC meetings as well. So we can also weigh in and be mindful of some of these trends that might be happening, because maybe Jan needs a little more attention in some way. And the fact that we've taken this proactive approach to talk about Jan means we're gonna be able to address Jan's issues long before Jan ends up with a suspension letter.
Jan, do you have
That
anything you
was
want to
very
say there?
bad.
Do you have
We also bring
anything?
Jan in for a PLC meeting, that sometimes we'll do that when the teachers are all together, is we'll say, well, where is Jan right now in science? Let's go pull Jan out.
Hey,
and
come
have-
on, guys.
and
Jen, you
Jan
have
come
to stop
talk with
belligerently
us about
performing in the middle of class.
I'm not taking
Jan's got a
Jan out of
question,
this.
Okay.
Mike thing.
Okay.
And then- Yeah,
Yeah,
because you
so-
did, you
But
kind
Dr.
of.
Blake, the other piece is, I do think that there
That's
are
okay, that's
probably,
fine.
so, I think back to my first year of teaching, and there was a mentality that if you didn't handle all of your discipline in your classroom, you were giving your authority away. In other words, if I send a student out, I'm signaling to the administration that I can't handle this.
I failed.
I can't manage my discipline. So I think that old mentality still exists in pockets here, I'm sure of that. That I need to handle my own stuff, because if I don't, it makes me look weak. I can't manage my classroom, or whatever the reason is. So I think it would be irresponsible to think that that doesn't exist. And if it exists, I'm sure there are some people who are still telling their colleagues, don't report that to the administration, because it makes you look weak, it makes you look like you're giving your authority, whatever. So I do think that old mentality exists, and it probably exists in pockets. And if I'm a member of a faculty that has that belief, I may influence my younger colleagues to say, hey, don't send people to the office because, but I think we're overcoming a very long-standing historical sort of mentality with the approach that we actually have here at the school, which is all about collaboration.
Jan, did you have a comment?
I did have a question about how do you get to be on the Justice Committee? What, are you, do you sign up, do you get credit, do you get appointed,
Born with the
do you get
superpower.
paid, you know, what?
Born with a superpower.
You're born
So
into
we do a
it, it's passed down
presentation at the
generations.
beginning of the year for the different grades and try to recruit kids. This year during, as Abby was referring to her role playing, we did, during FLT, we offered a couple sessions where kids could sign up and participate in a mock hearing, so they got the idea of, you know, what it was about. I did some direct recruiting. I kind of went through our lookbook and I picked out kids that I thought really aren't involved in too many things, but seem like, you know, they're decent kids and kind of, you know, again, we're not looking for, you know, they don't have to be the honor roll kids and involved in everything. It's just, they're just, you know, good kids who don't really know the passion. And I went down to the office and I kind of said, hey, be part of this. And so we got a few kids that way.
Sorry about that.
It's always one.
Weather alert.
No, it wasn't, no. Yeah, I canceled school, no. I did not.
About that.
I'm gonna take that soundbite. and put it
Yeah,
in.
no.
one's gonna see it tomorrow.
Tammy, do you have a question? Michael, do you have?
Go ahead and then I'll go.
It's, obviously, this has been something that I believe you've been working on since before I was a freshman. But when I was a freshman, I worked with Tammy's son to help the Justice Committee sort of test the waters and figure out what sort of incidents might come out of certain situations. And that was always fun, and it was interesting because I think we need to cultivate an environment in which administration and teachers and students all work together to solve disciplinary issues. And I think that everyone should have responsibility for that. 7, 8 years ago, I remember I was sitting at the counter of my neighbor's house, and her daughter at the time was a junior or a senior in high school, and she said, no, Mom, it's not nearly as bad. We haven't had a fight. We've only had 3, 4 fights this month. And that was always something that horrified me as a 5th or 6th grader, whatever I was back then, because they have 3 or 4 fights in the high school a month? Wow, that sounds crazy. You don't get that anymore. So I appreciate you guys coming in and clarifying that, obviously, because I think it's important to cultivate that environment. And I mean, obviously, I think that this is something that the board can agree upon and that the community has been interested in. Having your peers help other peers. I mean, back when I proposed the tutoring proposal, that was one of the key parts of it. You have students working with students to try to help cultivate an environment that works for everyone. So I think that's really important to just touch base upon.
But
Thank
Michael,
you for presenting it.
you hit on a really important point that really, whatever system we have, and our system's not perfect, we know that, but whatever system we have, really the ownership of it is collective between the teachers, the students, the parents, the administration, and the community at large, really all having a piece of that. And any one of those could be weak, but the others have to make up for that, because it's not going to work unless all 5 of those parts are in sync.
So I was looking at this handout, and towards the back, I guess it's page 29, it lists the different levels.
Yeah.
So level 1 dealt with teachers, and one of the things that's in there is tardiness, and then dress code, and then disrespect, insubordination. So the teacher is dealing in the classroom then with the disrespect and insubordination issues in their classroom?
Well, unless things can.
Can. Okay.
So they always have the opportunity, and they should, I mean, they're dealing with the student, they can say that, you know, I want to probably after class about it, and I pull it out in the hallway and have a quick conversation, so we're not talking about a major, a student is swearing at a
Right.
teacher, no,
Okay.
but it gives the teacher that power, it's their classroom.
Right.
So we're not saying, if the student's disrespectful, you need to send them out, because as a teacher, that's not how I want to operate. I want a
Right.
student in my classroom, and if they walk in with an attitude, I want to be able to pull them outside and say, hey, can you check that out the door, can you come back in
Right.
a different way, and,
Right.
if you need to go to guidance, we'll do that, but so that's the umbrella that says, this is yours, this is how you create your community in your classroom.
Mhm.
But for any of those things, if they become more of a major issue, or like I was saying before, any kind of disruption to your environment that impacts learning, then that comes out to us and we'll deal with it. But there are teachers that will send a student out and are very clear about, as somebody, I think Brian mentioned, I just want them out of my classroom right now, and you hold on to them because they can't be here. And they will actually say, I'll deal with it. I don't want you to do anything. I'm gonna handle it, because I know that student, I have a relationship with
Yeah.
them. But on this particular day, the way they're acting, based on who knows what, because usually it has nothing to do with what's going on in the
Right.
classroom. They need to be out of the room, and I'll take care of it. So that's not to say that we won't address insubordination, disrespect, or repetitive tardiness.
Right.
Even teachers will say to kids, hey, you came 5 minutes late, I'm gonna be up here for lunch, you come and do 5 minutes with me. That happens a lot too.
Well, and I guess my comment as a follow-up is just, you mentioned both, I think you've all mentioned at some point, there's student and then there's students. And when the one student is affecting all the students in the classroom, that's when I hope that the staff feels empowered to send them out. So it doesn't affect the learning of the whole classroom.
Yeah.
And that's just the one thing I want to say, because I want to make sure that that's heard. And it sounds like that happens,
And
and,
I'll even draw the line a little more clearly. It's our expectation that that's what will happen. It's our expectation that that's what will happen. And if teachers aren't doing that, they're not meeting our expectations, because we do believe. And there's one of the codes in there that says education, disruption to the educational environment. That's the one we hold most dearly, and we use that a lot. If any student is engaged in any kind of activity that's disruptive to the learning environment, we handle that one every day. And it could be the kid who's playing a video on his phone, or it could be the kid that's shooting water from a syringe, which I had yesterday during a lab. That lab was not happening while that kid was squirting
No.
water out of his syringe.
right,
I would also say I spent 3 years as a teacher here.
I know, yeah.
Mr. Stack was an administrator.
Right.
And I never felt as a teacher that I would be in any way, there would be any, backlash against me if I sent
Yeah.
a student out ever. I mean, all the discipline was handled in a very orderly way, if that's the way that I chose to handle it.
In fact, I'll also say that oftentimes the issues that escalate to bigger problems that we have to become involved in, it's because there was neglect on the part of the teacher to report it in the first place. It becomes a much bigger issue if it's not dealt with immediately.
Right.
So when I say it's our expectation, it's also a bit selfish, because I'd rather deal with a small problem up front than deal with something that's become a big problem because it was never addressed.
Right.
Totally agree.
Good. Nancy, Pam, then Mike.
Statistically, same person, repeat offender, or a lot of offenders, different offenders?
We spend 80% of our time working with 20% of the population in general.
Okay.
And that 20%, you know, we're not the only 3 adults plugged in with them. There's a lot of other adults in the school and out of the school plugged in with them as well. And they're usually the most complicated cases, because there's a lot of things at play, there's a lot of things going on at home. They're always gonna consume a lot of the time. We have the singleton offenders, you know. Maybe the student who climbs out the window on the 2nd story to go get a tennis ball because somebody dared him to. I'm not naming names.
Yeah, no.
Why are you doing that, Sheila? I have no idea what. You know, that might have been a singleton example, but that was a good one. That's one I'll always remember.
Do you have a follow-up?
I did.
Different infractions, so sometimes they're just,
Right.
you know, it's like one, so it's not like they continue to do the same thing, because as you said, there's, you know, things kind of ramp up and the consequences ramp up, but it could be the same student who's not really invested in school and doesn't have a lot of support in their life, and it's a different thing, you know, every week it might be something different.
Or a
that we're
student for
dealing with.
which this school environment in a 7:30 to 2:30 situation is not a good fit for them. And so we need to look at a modification to their day or to their program. Maybe they're not here all the time, they go and they work part of the day, or they take some classes here and they go to Exeter Adult Ed and take some classes over there. I mean, those are all things that, you know, Michael referenced that there have been a few students that have made it to the expulsion level, but there have been many others that didn't get to that point because we found other plans.
Well, that was going to be another part of my question, was how do you work with that student? So you just answered that part. And also statistically, how successful working with the students on that level have you been? And then the other part of that question was, do you notice a lot of younger students trying to see what they can get away with, but as they progress through the years, do the number of, grade-wise, 9, 10, 11, 12, do you find more in grade 9 versus 10 versus 11 versus 12?
What I would say, Jen, that,
No.
I'm sorry, Nancy, the types of things we
She's
see
not
in
the one who
grade
got in
9
trouble
and
in
10,
school.
sorry. The things we see in grade 9 and grade 10 are I would just call immature behavior.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I had a meeting with Peter early in the evening, and he made a reference to something that we actually see all the time. It's that miracle that happens in the summertime between 8th grade or 9th grade or 9th grade and 10th grade, where we're seeing kids making tremendous progress. An example I can give you is today I met with a young lady who actually referred herself to the office. She was having a conflict with 3 other students and wanted to tell me about it. And I had not spent any time with this young lady, she's a sophomore, all year. And I said to Ann, you know, this is who I'm dealing with today. And Ann said to me, Michael, I can't believe this is your first dealing with her. She was in the office every day last year as a 9th grader. It's a testament to the fact that Ann did a tremendous job sort of coaching her, and the young lady made tremendous growth between her freshman year and sophomore year. We have another student this year who Dr. Blake knows very well because he was suspended from school constantly last year, and we had one of those manifestation meetings that Ryan was talking about. A student was a special education student. Nothing we were doing for that student seemed to work until we connected that student with the right adult. And that young man has not had a single behavioral incident all year this year. In fact, I mean, has come to school, was having issues with truancy, is in school every day, has not been referred to the office one time, has not been suspended. And this young man spent more time out of school on suspension last year than he spent in school. So we see tremendous growth, but we have to realize that every kid, as Ann mentioned, comes to us with their own unique set of problems and issues. Some don't come from supportive families. Some come from very supportive families, but something awful happened last night. And they're bringing that with them into school today. And so every day, there's something new. But we see tremendous growth with, and we see a lot of progress in the system that we have in place. If we didn't see the progress we're seeing, we would make adjustments to the system. And it really is amazing. Michael made reference to physical fights. When I first came here, I was afraid to bring colleagues from my old school into this building for a building tour because I was so concerned with the physical violence that was happening in the school. And that just doesn't happen here anymore.
Well, you're just not trying hard.
Dr. Brown, you had a comment?
So, the underground economy is unreported activity. I'm just wondering if you have been trying to measure or maybe do an anonymous survey of teachers, a survey monkey, to find out their level of satisfaction or reluctance to report anything, so that you can get a good feel for how much might be going on that isn't reported over time?
Well, we have a pretty neat feedback system now, in that we meet twice a month with team leaders. So as Ann mentioned, we have these professional learning communities, and each team has a facilitator, and they are really the voice of their team. So we talk about issues of discipline on an ongoing basis. Brian mentioned it's a standing order on all of our team meetings, including the team meetings that we facilitate. We also have completed anonymous My Voice surveys where teachers and students have given us feedback. Those have been the vehicles that have driven a lot of the changes that we've made. So when you talk about the underground economy, if it exists, it's because people are not taking advantage of the anonymous ways of reporting concerns to us that we put out. I'm not sure how many more we could put out.
Those anonymous surveys are where people really kind of bring out their true feelings, if you know what I mean, when it comes to procedures and administrators and stuff. So I'm glad to hear that, sure.
Michael?
So obviously you've come to us today to present part of your job that 50 to 125%, as Mr. Sack said, takes up the day. My question is, I mean, you've worked very hard on this, you've worked very hard to cultivate an environment. So what can we, as students, as school board members, as a community, do to continue to help cultivate that environment, not just in the building, outside in the community, in the classrooms, in our homes? What can we do to help that thrive?
I mean, for me, Michael, the answer comes directly, it has a connection to student aspirations. It's unfortunate that we have parts of our community that don't value education, in that they don't promote education beyond the high school. I heard somebody say earlier tonight, if I had a nickel for every time some parent said to me as a teacher, my student is not college material. We don't believe that, right? We believe that we're trying to push every kid to the highest degree of training or education that they want to aspire to. But the reality is that in our communities, academics doesn't always come first. And it's a battle that we've been fighting for a very long time. Kids who take their academics seriously are not causing problems in school. The kids that are causing problems in school are the kids that feel disaffected, disengaged, or don't see a future for themselves that education is helping them to get to. So I think it's a community issue. We talk about that a lot in the office. How much of this is the school's responsibility, how much of it is the parents' responsibility, how much of it is part of the community? And it's a partnership, but I kind of feel like getting the community into the building, getting the community to be in support, of helping us to push their students to higher degrees of aspiration or academic training, I think is critical. If you look at our district, and you look at the towns, and you look at the census, the number of community members that we have in Kingston and Newton with college degrees is significantly lower than in other communities. So we're trying to promote higher education in a community where that always hasn't been a generational expectation, right? We're trying to change that, but it's something that we really could use help with, because we want all kids to aspire to that higher level of training. Whether that's a certification to be a plumber, or an electrician, or to be a physicist. We want them to push themselves to the highest level they can. Anything that the community can do to help us to do that would be great, because when kids are engaged in that kind of endeavor, they're not causing problems in school, they're engaged in their schoolwork.
True statement.
I would
Right.
also say too that it's a great exercise to talk with anybody about their own personal responsibility in any kind of situation. And it's really easy to pass the buck and to talk about what other people are doing or not doing versus saying, what's my role in this? Because I can only control myself. And so what am I bringing to the table? Is it negativity? Is it positive? Is it something positive? If I've done something wrong, how do I make things better? And then also this idea of community that, as Mike was saying, we're all in this together, and instead of finger pointing, again, saying, what can I bring to this? What kinds of solutions can I offer? Because we're all in this together. And I just want to go back to that statistic, about 50% to 125% of our time is dealing with student discipline. We do not have this fast food idea of discipline. The kids don't come in and we don't churn them out. It doesn't work that way. The reason why we spend a lot of time on discipline is because we spend a lot of time with kids. We don't say, you did this, here's your detention, see you later, bye. It is building those relationships and talking with kids and caring about them. What happened? How are you doing? Why did you behave that way? What can we do for you? How do we get you back to class? How are you going to fix this with the teacher? What's going on at home? Why does this keep happening? Having those conversations for us to get to know the kids so that they trust us, they see us as adults that care about them and care about how their well-being as well as their education. So a lot of what we do really looks a little bit like guidance counseling.
Yeah, totally.
And these 2 weeks while the guidance counselors are busy doing scheduling, we did a lot of guidance counseling today. And I think, it's really helped our culture in the building because the kids know that we're not disciplinarians, we are, but we talk to them a lot when they come to the office about our goal is to continue to educate them. That really is what we're doing. We're trying to help them be successful in this building. So that is one of the reasons why it takes up so much of our time.
And we're paired with a guidance counselor too. I don't know if you caught that in the discipline form, but I work with all the students who have Dr. Lennox as a guidance counselor. And there's a reason for that, because there's a lot of overlap, and he and I can work together and tag team the same way that Michael can with Laura with Diane, and Ian can with Laura.
No further comments or questions?
No, thank you.
Just one final comment for myself, and I'll just read because I'm really feeling under the weather. It's true, our district doesn't turn away students from the communities of Fremont, Kingston, Newton. We are a public school. Going back to community, 20%, going back to the graduation rate. It's a great point, Mr. Mel, very great point. Much is truly left to the discretion of the staff, the leadership, who face no small amount of pressure from other children's parents to minimize disruption and maximize the student achievement. We understand that that's happens, and I appreciate that. This would seem to be a simple matter of common sense, but I truly do appreciate you guys coming here this evening and expressing and answering many of these questions that we've all had and learned and heard. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Never
One
failed to
shameless
deliver.
plug, since I still have the mic, tomorrow, 2:30, we're having our kickoff.
Here, here, here.
Committee meeting. If any of you would like to come, we'd love to have you there. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people who have not been connected with our district, who are looking forward to coming out and helping and participating because they live in our community. They want to see this project through and they have some really great ideas, so.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
I have the Weather Channel up here.
What are they saying?
Going back and forth.
Order.
What are they saying?
It's a mess.
It is a mess. It's supposed to be.
6 to 8?
You know you live in New Hampshire when the weather within 3
I
weeks,
took my plow blade
summer,
off.
spring, fall.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're ready? All right.
Silly.
Let's move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much.
Only takes a minute to put
Hey, guys. All right, I would just like to say thank you.
Thank you.
It was a true privilege last week to stand on the stage, engage, and share how the school board has worked towards ensuring that there are adequate resources to provide an exceptional learning experience for the children of our community. I want to thank you, the board. I want to thank the community for allowing me to do that, and thank the leadership team for your assistance in making those moments happen. Thank you, guys. Public comments. I'd like to open up the floor for public comment.
Kevin Holt, Kingston.
Hi, Kevin.
Dr. Blake, I don't want to speak out of turn here because I'm speaking from experience as a staff member here in the district. There are many factors for discipline issues. Often it's out of frustration from the student from not understanding the material, being able to do the work, or being able to know that they're going to get this assignment and they're going to go home tonight and they're going to have a question and there's going to be nobody there to answer it for them. Sometimes it's a call for help. It's actually, hey, I need your attention too. And I'm not used to just raising my hand or standing by and waiting, because at home I have 3 brothers and sisters and the one who screams the loudest gets the most help. This kind of relates back to the budget, and I know that our communities do not have an endless amount of money. I know that taxes are a huge problem. But increasing our student to teacher ratio only increases our discipline problems because it concentrates those 20% students into less classes. It concentrates our special education students into bigger classes, and they need more attention and more help. And they cry for more attention. So those discipline issues start to evolve. I would hate to see the progress we've made with discipline in our schools and the progress we've made with all our kids take a step back, because we've been reducing staff in this district for 7 or 8 years. I've been a PTA president in the school. I've been a substitute teacher, and for the last 3 years, I've been a paraprofessional. I've seen the reduction in staff in each of the buildings. I have 3 kids in the district. If we reduce too quickly, if we try to keep up with the numbers, we are going to cause these concentrations, and the discipline problems will get worse. And it is often, because we don't cut special education, because by law we can't, it is often the regular education students that suffer, the students at the top, the students who want to excel, who can't get the attention they need. I just urge the public to think about this as we chase the dollar. Sometimes it is smarter to spend the dollar than to try to save the penny.
Thank you, Kevin. Other further?
Abigail Parrott, Kingston. I would like to announce to the board that the Students of the Voice organization is looking to hold a district-wide Meet the Candidates Night during the week of March 6th. It'll be at the high school at 7 p.m. If any of you have any questions, concerns, comments, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby.
Cool. Good idea.
That's school board, school committee, is that what I'm hearing? School committee, or
School
school board members?
School district,
Only, right.
school board and budget committee?
Yes.
Oh.
Anyone who's running for public office that has to do with school.
Okay.
Okay, March 6th, what time?
The week of March 6th, yes.
Oh, week of.
What
okay.
day?
Students of the Voice will be having a meeting Friday where we'll be discussing the date and coming up with time.
Be careful asking questions.
At that time, and I'll send an email out to the budget committee and the school board with the finalized date.
Keep in mind, Sports Awards is March 6th.
Okay, will do.
All right, thank you, Abby. Other further public comments?
Cheryl Gannon from Kingston. I'd like to speak tonight as an individual member of the Budget Committee. I am not representing the whole committee, but I would like to give some facts. I don't want the school board administration or public to have the impression that the Budget Committee presentation at the deliberative session was sanctioned by the full committee. We received it the morning of the deliberative, and some members were able to email some concerns, but not all of them were, in fact, addressed. The presentation was, had a lot of editorial commentary, But again, it was not sanctioned by the whole committee. There were 9 slides that had either been altered or are brand new changes to the public hearing presentation that had been discussed. For example, the committee never discussed nor approved a slide about teacher retention, SAT scores, staffing catch-up, class size study, high school class sizes, mill rate or impact of warrant articles. Another slide called student retention suggested solutions, school board policy shift. Not only were these issues not discussed or approved by the committee as issues or as information to present to the public, these are completely out of the scope of the responsibility of the Budget Committee, which is charged with presenting just the operating budget, not giving suggestions on how education should be delivered. The Budget Committee, I believe, seriously overstepped its bounds and did not present information in a neutral way. And I hope that in the future that will be a consideration when presenting an operating budget, that the committee does in fact stick to its responsibility, and that the school board has the responsibility as the governing body to deliver and decide how education is to be delivered in the district. Thank you.
Are there further public comments at this time?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Giordano from Newton. I just wanted to make a comment on Mr. Tamel and Ms. Hadwin and Mr. Stack's presentation tonight. There was a lot of information there, and it was a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And I've read the handbook. I haven't read every page, I have to admit. But there was a lot of great information there, and I, for one, am really happy to have heard it. So I just wanted to thank them, even though they're not here anymore. But I just wanted to thank them for that.
Thank you.
Jim Baker, Newton. I'd like to commend the Budget Committee on the process that they undertook this year. They worked with the administration. They reviewed expenses instead of just taking a budget and reducing it or increasing it. They actually looked at expense history, starting with the past 3 years and going forward to the present year all the way to December of this current year. So the budget that they came up with was based on money that was actually being spent to run the school, not based on increasing or decreasing a budget, which is an estimate, and not actual expenses. My observation, having attended the past 2 years of Budget Committee meetings on a regular basis, is the prior chair has an issue with the new chair. And there was a philosophical dissonance between the approaches of doing those budgets. In the past, the Budget Committee has entirely worked based on a budget that they received and had to review in 3 or 4 weeks. The prior chair initiated a program where they tried to get the information much ahead of that, and also would look at interviewing department heads and looking at costs, but they were unsuccessful in doing that. The current chair and the BudCom that was elected this year was very successful at doing that, and then, in my opinion, they did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Are there further public comments?
Mary Sear from Kingston.
Hi, Mary.
I think it's great that there is a very structured discipline matrix at the high school anyway, because that's the presentation we saw tonight. And I know that each individual case that comes up is in fact individual and cannot fit into a cookie cutter resolution. I respect that. But as a member of the community, one of the things that I'm hearing is that there's a lack of consistency in delivery of consequences. As an example, a friend of mine has a student here, and this particular student, as of the mid-year, had racked up, I don't know, say 18 tardy incidents, arriving to school late. And I said, are there any consequences? And she said, no, it's left to the teacher's discretion. So not only is this particular student not receiving any admonishment or encouragement to show up late, there's no teeth to the policy, should I say. You know, when she questioned her own child, the child said, well, I'm a good student, so the teacher's not going to make an issue for me. It's the kids who pose more challenges and issues and concerns that generally will receive or be on the, you know, have consequences levied. And as a parent, you talk about common sense and discipline, and consistency needs to be there. And if I could just encourage an opportunity in this whole process, is that there's some consistency from teacher to teacher, from team to team, because if a student sees one child getting away with something, or not being reprimanded, or not being encouraged through the whatever process is, you know, vetted for that particular child, then what is it telling the other students in that class? And I think a big part of the frustration that I'm reading, and again, I'm not involved in this, but I'm observing and reading and hearing from other parents who do have children here and who are frustrated because their children are not able to focus and concentrate, and who are distracted, and teachers who reportedly, and I have no, you know, confirmation, but, you know, frustrated and in tears. I'm glad that there is a process, but if there's any way to encourage all those who are responsible for those first I don't know, what do you call them, first class offenses, the ones that are the
Level one or.
the level one offenses, if there's some way to encourage them as a team or as individuals to provide consistency, I think it would help to alleviate a lot of the frustration and maybe make a more conducive learning environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Other public comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, moving on. School board comment? Yes, Ms. Ross?
Week after week, I read and hear the inaccuracies being printed and being vocalized. I normally don't react to these as they don't dignify a response. However, I do take exception when the integrity of not only the school board, but our business administrator, our award-winning business administrator, I might add, is called into question. Shame on the moderator for not allowing anyone to challenge the bold-faced lie uttered during last week's deliberative. For this, I profusely apologize to our business administrator, something we should have been allowed to do last week. Contrary to something I heard on YouTube, it takes well over 10 minutes to develop the default. Then, once completed, it's presented with the budget, at which point the school board has the opportunity to review it, and if that isn't enough, it is then sent to the state. Many, many I's make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's dotted. For someone to suggest that there had been an error which was brought to the attention of the board, and the board knowingly ignored it, is ludicrous, and anyone believing it, more the fool. And one other inaccuracy I'd like to correct, as it was noted on a recent post, that the Budget Committee had requested a compromise with the school board on a number and that the school board had refused. While the first part of that statement is true, somebody, a person on the Budget Committee, approached the school board in a very casual, I guess, manner and asked if we would be willing to a compromise of an increase in the proposed budget of $200,000. It was a very set number. That is what the school board agreed to not consider. However, if last week's deliberative is any indication of what the school board might have agreed to based on all of the positive reaction that many of us here had with the increase of the $500,000 $500,500, then I do believe a compromise could have been reached, but that number was never asked. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Other school board comments? None?
Sure.
Tammy Clark.
So, that's not working, that microphone. I'll use yours.
Speak loud.
I would just like to agree with Mrs. Gannon, who spoke earlier. As the school board representative to the Budget Committee, I witnessed the same process where we received the presentation, I think it was around 11:30 the day of the meeting. I understand it had gone between the chair and the business administrator, and there were some corrections suggested, and I'm not sure all those were taken into consideration. I also think that her decision, or maybe her consultation with some other chair, some other members of the Budget Committee, to put additional slides in without looking to the whole committee for their input, I don't think that was the best way to go about it. And that's her right as the chair to make the decision, but as Cheryl mentioned, it would have been nice to have there at least been a discussion about that. Furthermore, I don't think that there was any concern from Cheryl, the chair prior to this year's chair, about the process. This year, the process was different than it was last year. You have, each year, there's been a coordination with the administration to review, and the requests have been made from the Budget Committee to the administration, and there's always been good coordination between the Budget Committee and the administration. So this year's chair took a different tact than it had been done in the past, and that doesn't mean one is any better than another. It's just a different way of going about it. So that's all I'd like to say.
Other school board comments here? You can, yeah.
All right. Well, this one's working now, I think.
Oh, decide to work.
Yeah.
Just change the batteries.
There are two sides to every story. Truth lies somewhere in the middle. So I think when we talk about and we have presentations from the administration on discipline, and then we have community members that come forth and say, well, this is what I've heard, I think that that is true democracy in action. And I think that, speaking for myself, I would always encourage that kind of comment to be made by the public, because when you have concerned citizens that come to these meetings to voice their opinion, I think that that is one of the best ways that we can hear from our community without having to send out surveys, anonymous or otherwise, without having to have exit interviews, which I believe we should have, but I think we can also have face-to-face interactions from the community saying, well, this is what I've heard that's going on, this concerns me, can your administration respond to it, can your school board respond to it, or can we, again, cultivate an environment that helps prevent that? So I just want to thank you for that insightful comment, and I hope that there are others that come from that.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you to the rest of the board for the comments. I'd like to go ahead and move on to student council reports. Mr. Michael, Mr. Mann.
Again, we have a packet.
Yes, you do, because at the last meeting, Nancy said, Nancy made the mistake of saying, hey, where's this? So I printed out 9 copies for all of you.
Save a tree, Michael. Save a tree.
So this is the Winter Carnival 2017 packet. There are some modifications as of yesterday's student council meeting. We have decided that, I believe unanimous vote, that Family Feud was going to be relying too heavily on participation from grades, which we were concerned with might cause some interaction or speculation of, well, the juniors are in charge of Family Feud, so they probably just rigged the thing so we could win.
Stack their chips.
So, yeah, and there's also a lot of preparation that goes into week events, and we don't have a lot of time for that. So if you go in on page 8, and I think it might be altered on your thing, but it says week events, Family Feud has been replaced with, get this, a sled pull.
A what?
A
Plenty
sled
of-
pull, which there's plenty of snow for now.
They used to do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
They used to
so
do
there
that.
will be 3 students pulling around one student in their class in the snow on a designated course, yes. And
Nice, fun.
I hope that there are
No one
references
injured.
to many Christmas
No
movies
injuries.
made. Yeah, and no injuries.
Do they have to dress
But,
in
you know,
costume?
I don't think so.
That should happen.
But I mean, if I was participating, I would. So on also page 12, there's a Family Feud section there. Said Family Feud, and the sled pull is obviously replacing that. There are details that go into that. But I believe everything else is pretty much the same. Also, I had a request from the student council and several faculty members to thank the board, thank the budget committee, thank the community for a really awesome deliberative session. I mean, from what I've heard, those results were historical. I mean, I don't think that the community has seen those kind of people showing up to a deliberative session since this high school was being voted on. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. So they just wanted to say thank you, obviously, to several of the positions that may have been included or discussed in that night that were supported. Obviously, on behalf of them, I would like to thank community members that came out to support, and all community members that came to the deliberative session, because I know it's not easy. I mean, we do it so often, we have an understanding of knowing it's not easy to be here on a Wednesday night so late. Lastly, the student council is submitting an application for National Honors Council across the country. This is an award that we have won consecutively, I believe, for the last 3 years at least. 4 schools in the state got it last year. Sanborn was one of them. So hopefully we can keep that trend running because we have a really fantastic student council, as you can see by the information you've been handed tonight.
Thank you for this.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
All right.
And if there are any questions, I'll have another packet to you 2 weeks from
Get
now.
it? You should have done it
Yeah,
fresh
vacation.
out.
Let's move on here because it is weather elements outside and it's getting late and people got to be
There
safe.
is weather outside indeed.
So we have 4 subcommittee reports. I'd like to move right into policy. Ms. Ross, you ready?
If I can find my stuff. I had it all together.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Yep. I'll get myself ready too.
Yes, I did. I just have 2 this evening, and they're both for final read. A little bit of house cleaning here. Back in October, we had, as a committee, we had reviewed the qualifications of the superintendent,
It's in there,
and we had changed a little bit of verbiage under the statement of policy, and we had brought it to the board for first read, but not for second. So I would just like to have a vote for a second read on the qualifications of the superintendent under CBA. And the verbiage that we had changed, this is not the correct one, we had taken out 2. And it's 1 and 2 now. 1 is possess a superintendent's credential, which is valid in the state of New Hampshire. And 2 is have had at least 5 years of successful experience as an educational leader in the profession through active participation in a variety of areas. So we had
Omitted that.
omitted 2.
Mhm.
So if I can have, I'd like to, a motion to approve for final read.
So moved.
Second.
All in
It's,
favor?
okay. You in favor of your second? All right.
Yes.
That's unanimous. That's
Sorry, I'm
Jan and
trying to find the
Tammy
next
there.
one.
You got that? All right.
And
Thank
This
you.
will be in the,
The policy manual.
well, it'll also be in the book that students receive next year, correct?
Everyone.
No?
No,
No.
not this. This is.
No,
That's-
this isn't
that's-
on
yeah.
rules.
That's
Oh,
on,
that's
it's
superintendent.
on the website.
Well, I
policy.
just relevance to tonight.
And The last meeting we had brought for a first read IJK, and I bring this up for final read this evening as well. IJK, which is the Supplemental Materials Selection and Adoption, which was formerly movies and videos. And if there's no objections to what we had striked during the meeting, the policy will be final with everything that's crossed out that we had discussed at the last meeting. I don't know that we need to go over it. We all had a copy of it the last time. So again, a motion for a final read on IJK.
So he was flipping that up and down.
All right, so I'll start at the very top.
Is there an opt-out part of this policy?
Oh, for the students if they don't want to see
You know,
it?
the parents?
Oh, there is. I think we had
Yeah,
put
let
that
me,
in, depending on the level,
Okay,
the grade
okay.
level.
Okay, he just went
Mhm.
over it so fast I couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Okay,
is.
that's all.
There is.
Yep.
All right. So is there a motion on the floor to accept the
So
second
moved.
read? Okay,
Yep.
that's
Second.
Jan and
Discussion?
Tammy. Any further discussion?
All in favor?
Okay, it's unanimous again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on from policy to personnel, Ms. Ross, welcome again.
Thank you. Tonight, we had our meeting at 6 PM, and
That's a
it was
lie.
to discuss.
5. It was 5:15.
Oh, it was 5, I'm sorry.
Sorry, maybe it was
Yeah,
typo there.
It was over at 6. The sole purpose of the meeting was to discuss the 2 vacancies that we have for principals at the elementary schools, one at the Bakey and one at the Memorial. And what we have decided to do is we are going to be holding, the first thing we're going to do is hold public forums, which hopefully we will gather information from the staff and community about what they are looking for in a new principal. The first is scheduled for the Bakey, February 21st. And parents and students are welcomed from 5:30 to 6:30 at the Bakey for input from the parents in the community. On February 22nd, we'll have our second forum at the Memorial, and that will be for parents and students, and they'll be welcome there from 5:30 to 6:30 as well. And there will be pizza served at both events, so bring parents and students, please come. You're welcome, and we value your input. There will also be additional input that community members can access via the web. The school board will accept written input from interested community and staff members relative to what they are looking for in a new principal via an online form, which will bring you more information on where you can get that, but those need to be completed by February 25th. So that's where we stand with our search for the principals at the school. So,
Right.
yes, Michael?
Are these town-specific events, Bakey's for Kingston, Memorial for Newton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you could, if
You
you're
can
from
go,
Newton, you
you're
want
more
to
than
go over,
welcome to
sure.
go.
Yeah,
But-
go to the Bakey or, you know.
Right. I just wasn't sure if, like,
They're town-specific because I think the needs may be,
Yep.
the needs or desires in a principal may be different
Right,
in
right.
each community.
But anybody can go.
Right.
Well, yeah, they're open
You
events.
can go if you want.
yeah, okay.
It's
I
also
just wanted to make sure there wasn't
When's our
a
public hearing? Isn't it
taboo
the
on
20th?
you come to
22nd,
yours
that's why
and you
it's
come to mine.
6:30.
Okay.
So is that at the middle school?
At Memorial.
A memorial.
So I have middle school here for the public hearing.
No, we'll just have to saunter over.
So it's a
Yeah.
fly across the field?
So something to take note here is, I think you said it, but the faculty will be meeting with, as well. The leadership team will be getting input from the faculty those days too. And then again, as noted, there'll be additional input, form online for, what is the community looking for when hiring a new principal at either schools. Okay. Any questions or comments for Nancy or the rest of the personnel subcommittee? Okay. This is an aggressive timeline. There's a lot of principals that are out there right now being gobbled up by other communities. We need to get on top of this now, for what it's worth. Okay. Thanks, Nancy. EISA, Ms. Jan? Do you have a report? I know you just had that meeting, so you don't have to have a report, but do you have a report?
It'd be better if related.
Okay, okay.
It was 2 hours. so-
I understand. Fair enough. All right, budget, Ms. Gluck?
Sure. So the Budget Committee met Saturday at 5 at the Newton Town Hall for about 20 minutes. The goal of the meeting was to vote on the warrant articles after the deliberative session. Before the meeting, or at the onset of the meeting, one of the members asked if we would just be voting on the warrant articles that were amended at the deliberative, which is what we thought was going to happen, but we actually voted on all of the warrant articles. Again, the Budget Committee did. And I believe I shared those results. But I can go over them again if you'd like me to.
Yeah. Go ahead. Finish your report. And then
Okay.
we'll-
So, the Budget Committee did re-vote on all of them. Article 3, which is the operating budget, 7 to recommend, 1 abstention. Article 4, the professional staff contract, 4 voted to recommend, 3 not recommend, 1 recusal. Article 6, the support staff, 6 to recommend, 2 to not recommend. Article 9, it was a unanimous to recommend. Article 10, Article 9 was the ADA at Swayze and Chase. Article 10, 3 to recommend, 5 to not recommend. I believe that was the middle school windows. Article 11, 3 to recommend, 5 to not recommend. Article 12, 3 to recommend, 5 to not recommend. And Article 13, which the last one was
The Memorial Baking
Memorial Bakie Middle School capital improvements, 3 to recommend, 5 to not recommend. And then we were done.
So the question was asked, I think, because there was concern about whether that was legal to do
Right.
that or not.
Well, there was a question, do we vote, and I kind of thought, and Mrs. Gannon as well, do we just vote on the ones that were amended?
That were changed.
The
And-
change.
And legally, the only ones that can be changed are the ones that were amended at the meeting. So you can re-vote on the budget and re-vote on any of the petition warrant articles that were changed.
Right.
At the session, but you can't re-vote on things that remained the
No
same.
changes.
Right.
Things that were no changes, yeah.
So the.
So that would have meant,
We ran that past legal counsel just to be sure.
So that means professional staff and the support staff agreements should not have been
Yeah, they
up
can't
for
be,
discussion.
and that goes the same.
Same with us
For us
tonight.
tonight. Yep.
The
Right.
board this evening, when you re-vote, the only ones that you can re-vote on are the ones that were changed at the deliberative
Right.
session.
Because they've changed, you may now change your vote.
right.
Yeah,
So that
you
was
might.
3, 11, 12, and 13.
Right.
Okay. So
3, 11, 12,
then
13.
4, 6, 9, and 10 will remain on the warrant as the Budget Committee initially voted.
Voted,
Okay,
right. As well as the board.
as well as the board. Okay,
So
all right.
what was
Okay.
the result, recommendation on the budget as amended at the deliberative?
So we're only
It would
voting
have
on
been,
3.
it's 7 to recommend, 1 abstention on Article 3.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you, Dr. Blake and Carol, for looking into that as well. All right, let's move on to unfinished business, to deliberative, which I guess ultimately is a perfect segue from the budget to here.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I guess ultimately, I know, Pete, you had asked, you wanted to bring up a question or comment, so we'll write.
No, I just wasn't sure on the timing, because I knew that once there's a change on the floor, we voted for this, but now there's a change, we might change our mind. You know, there is one thing that I would like to say, I was gonna hold to the end. Could we please get whatever our changes, if there are any changes, can we please get all of this to the town clerk? Got to get to the printer, got to get back, got to proofread it, got to send. So, she just asked me if I'd make sure, because she's up quite a bit of a timeline,
Yeah.
and she would have liked to have had it last week, and we tried to have a meeting after the meeting, but we were never able to get it, so she needs it pretty
Just received her
quick.
minutes today, this afternoon.
Right.
Well, but we may change our vote number now. Oh, okay. I'm just the messenger.
No, it's just, that you wouldn't have been able, we needed to have the official minutes in order to make sure
Right,
that all the
right,
wording was
yeah.
appropriate.
All right. I mean, have you been late in the past?
No.
Okay.
No,
That's what I wanted.
I'm just
So I
the-
think she's going on vacation.
I'm
I'm the messenger. She asked me if I would make sure they get it, that's all.
Okay. All right, so as alluded to, we have, and as in our packets and everywhere as we've seen, we have Articles 3, 11, 12, and 13 for discussion this evening. I'd like to go ahead and go through each one of them, obviously, one by one. Is there anyone who wants to just open discussion right now relative to the operating budget number 3?
I make a motion that we approve the operating budget, that we recommend the operating budget in the amount of whatever it is there.
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's a recommendation on the floor for...
$34,496,468.
Yes, okay,
I think it was a great compromise.
okay.
I was pleased with the compromise, and I was sitting next to Mr. Broderick, and he's like, that's a good compromise.
And I said there'd be one before they even brought it up.
Yeah, and the people there, I think, felt the same. So, and looking back at the discussion that we all had relative to the budget, and then coming up with the warrant articles, and thinking about kind of the whole package, I feel like it still accomplishes the school board goals, trying to support the passing of the professional and the support staff contract, as well as the priorities for the capital improvement project.
Absolutely. Other further discussions or comments relative to the motion on the floor? Dr. Brown?
Did you get my email?
I did. If you'd like, I could pull that up. Actually, bear with, let me get my
I'll
email.
just start reading my comments, okay? So, I still support Article 3 with the amended numbers.
Bless you.
But the increase of over $500,000 is not necessary, I believe. If approved, that number does not have to be spent in FY 2018. If we have a school board willing to explore and implement program reforms, we can contain the spending level in our property tax growth. For the following reasons, I think we can spend below this number, improve student performance, and ensure our teachers enjoy their jobs. First, I need to emphasize, because we seem to tend to forget this, we have a declining enrollment, and enrollment is expected to decline another 2% next year and 16.5% in the next 4 years. Second, we have shrinking class sizes at the high school. A majority of high school class sections have fewer than 20 students, with dozens of them below 15 per class, and I counted only 4 classes with enrollment above the board mandated 25, 2 with 26 and 2 with 27. These 4 are outliers. The high school master's schedule evidences continued slack, and this area will be a large source for savings in 2018. I invite the school board, both existing and new members, after the March election to explore immediate reorganization of the high school master schedule. How many of you have looked at the master schedule? I know Ms. Gluck has looked at it. I'm not sure how many others have. I'd emphasize there is no plan to fire our skilled long-term employees or eliminate elective courses at the high school. However, when demand is falling for specific courses, e.g. French or family consumer science, staff should be encouraged to shift some of their teaching time to related fields for which they are qualified to maintain a full-time position and salary. To use the parlance of union folks, it's unfair and inequitable for some educators to bear shoulders class sections of 20 to 25 students, while others are afforded shrinking classes of 10 or fewer students. NISPA, in a civil society, no one is entitled to a full-time, lifetime position. We all bear constant change as the consumers out there discover new choices and options. We can also easily flip the script on those who insist we must keep a full-time position in subject area X out of respect, quote unquote, for that employee, by observing we must also show respect for all of our citizens who have paid many thousands in property taxes over the decades, and respect their household finances by making prudent adjustments to staffing when needed. And finally, I do not believe the problems we face are due to inadequate funds. It is the programs with which we have been experimenting. With shrinking high school class sizes, one would think this would translate into higher test scores since teachers have more time to devote to each teacher. But we have declining test scores in math and English proficiency and rising cost per student. Why has this happened? Our teachers and students have been tasked with working with an experimental education model, the Smarter Balanced Common Core model, for several years. Our administrators hitched their professional wagons to the Common Core model, as have only 3 other New Hampshire districts. After several years, the experiment has been disappointing, and we have suffered declines in math proficiency results for 5 of 7 grade levels. At the high school, our 11th grade proficiency scores fell below 30% to 28% proficient in 2015-16. Only a handful of New Hampshire high schools test below 30%. Even our 11th grade English proficiency suffered a decline from 75 to 55% proficient or better. Dr. Blake wrote in a recent op-ed, quote, "There are several seats open on both school board and budget committee. What is particularly absent is representation by parents who have students currently attending Sanborn. Does the superintendent not believe that the business community and local consumers have an equal, if not greater, interest in ensuring our graduates leave skilled and well-trained? The adoption of Smarter Balanced Assessment and Common Core model has produced academic costs for our district in terms of lost progress for a large percentage of students. I do not blame our teachers or our students for this result." I'm almost done.
All right, no personal attacks here and
Well,
no further.
Mr.
You went to,
Trammell-
no, you went to Mr. Dr. Blake there a second ago.
I just said I don't blame-
No personal attacks, no infighting.
Okay.
No
I
more.
think she's quoting a newspaper.
I was
Fair.
quoting from an op-ed.
Fair.
We need to make sure we understand everyone has something at stake in improving our schools, was my point. And while Mr. Trammell and Ms. Hume Howard have been working diligently to convince me otherwise, the learning model we have concerns me. U.S. News reports there is a steady decline nationally in states using Smarter Balanced Common Core, from 32 down to 16 states. Sanborn's move toward these new outcomes, such as non-curricular competencies, part of Smarter Balanced Common Core, may explain our math proficiencies decline. Rather than emphasizing arithmetic, reading, critical thinking, logic, and the scientific method, students are now assessed for teamwork, collegiality, and collaboration skills, what used to be called good manners. More importantly, what I'm left wondering is why? Why would one want to collaborate with a group of people who are far less prepared, less well-read, and less skilled at critical thinking and research methods and analysis than oneself? Traditionally, folks demonstrating these superior abilities were called, begins with an L, leaders. Right, Dr. Blake? So I suggest we return to an educational model that produces leaders, not just the mushy education collectivism that now emphasizes being a good collaborator, as Common Core and other institutions promoting it have been doing. Being a leader is not a zero-sum game. If one person's a leader, it doesn't mean everyone else cannot be a leader as well. A small business person is a leader. Emphasizing skills rather than collaboration per se is an American tradition which values individual independence, excellence at one's craft, and a pioneer spirit. Let's return to that model in our classrooms. Instead of asking voters to spend an additional $1.5 million to shore up an ailing education experiment, we can improve our performance and operate under budget by working directly with our teachers rather than indirectly through a Common Core math coordinator to boost K-12 performance. There is fiscal fat to be cut as well, such as the new PR position for $103,000 per annum. Thank you.
Dr. Brown, why did you ask me, you sent me this at 3-something this afternoon?
Oh, that's just showing the participation levels among states is declining. There were 32 states using Smarter Balanced Common Core, and there's been a jettisoning of that approach
I
by a
only want to
number of
hear,
states.
I only want to hear one sentence. At 9:30, you said, "Our administrators have." I just want to hear like that sentence. I just want to hear that, because it was towing or tailing or whatever it was. I just want to hear that. I want to hear it.
But why?
I'm looking for
I'm
the
asking,
sentence.
because I have a question then, once I hear it.
Well,
Why?
It triggered and he,
I'm-
can you not remember exactly?
Why am I being
what?
questioned what I'm asking? I have a question. At 9:30.
Do you remember the exact sentence?
Yeah, our administrators have been tailing some of the Common Core. That's what I want to hear. Because there's a reason. I ask things for reasons. I like facts.
Our administrators have hitched their professional wagons to the Common Core model, as have only 3 other New Hampshire districts.
Okay, can I ask a question, Dr. Blake?
Yeah.
Is that a true statement?
No. No.
And
Not at all.
can I ask, because are we, how are we participating in this? Dr. Brown? Are we participating in Smarter Balance and Park? What is our role in this?
With our state, we haven't actually changed our model yet statewide, I don't think. It's being discussed.
But you're making a statement as if we are not being leaders in the change.
can I bring up a point of order?
No.
Yes,
no.
I can. Of course I can.
I'm asking a question.
And I'm asking for a point of order.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Can we get on with the budget instead of this? Why are we discussing this? We're on the budget.
Because that's what we're discussing.
I agree with you, Mr. Broderick. I technically agree with you, but I have challenge with the comments being made. Because, and I'd like leadership to go ahead, if you don't mind, if you're interested, because I don't want to speak out of tune here.
Well, there's,
No.
the entire state, first of all, the Common Core political football is
A mess.
not a curriculum. So I chuckle when I hear, oh, this nasty Common Core. It's a political football. In terms of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, the entire state of New Hampshire is taking the Smarter Balanced Assessment. The PACE program is designed, and we've presented here numerous times over the last couple of years about that. The PACE program has nothing to do with the Common Core directly, but rather the development of alternative assessments to move away from, in fact, the Smarter Balanced Assessment. So that Sanborn is one of what's now 9 school districts in the state, because it's expanding, that are participating in PACE and the Smarter Balanced, and we have permissions from the federal government to only do Smarter Balanced in grade 3 in reading, 4 in math, 8th grade, both assessments, math and English language arts, and in 10th grade, we're taking the SAT now. So over the last couple of years, there's been a number of, 11th grade, I'm sorry. Over the last couple of years, there have been a number of changes to the grade levels in which the assessments are taken. The assessments themselves have changed over time, because we went from the Smarter Balanced in 11th grade to the SAT now. And in fact, it's to show that we don't need to do all of that standardized testing. Our performance assessment of competency education is to move away from all of that standardized testing.
So really quick, how many student graduating classes have gone through a full PACE environment? And I'd say like a 6-year curriculum of PACE, from the middle school to the high school.
Well, but But
No one has.
No, they haven't.
None of them have.
None. So just leave it at that. No, not a single one of the graduating. Michael?
No.
You're graduating, right?
Yes, well,
And
yeah.
have you gone
Yeah.
through a full pace?
No.
Okay. The reason why I bring this all up, Mr. Broderick, is because there was comments stated that were this, things you had indicated, Dr. Brown, which I agree with a portion of the behind-the-scenes questioning and wanting to see more and get better outcomes. I get that. And all of us here want to see better outcomes. But we are being leaders in the state, in the nation, on getting and you help us make that point here by sending us this graph by saying, hey, you guys are on top of that. You are leaders in pioneering the replacement to these things. So thank you. So the point being here is, it's just, you help that cause, but yet there was kind of a slight dig in that comment, which, not true.
Well, we're still tied to the Common Core standards, which many districts are
What would you
just.
want us to be tied to?
But it's a framework. It's good to have a framework, because if we're not working with a framework, then how are you going to go ahead and compare models?
And what would you like us to be tied to?
And what are the answers?
Can we move the motion?
We should, but
We're going to discuss that tonight?
No.
No, but why did you bring that up now? That should have been your school board comment.
Okay.
I
Not when
agree.
we're talking about
I
the
agree.
budget.
All right, I agree.
There's a move the motion
Yes.
here.
Move the motion to
I
a
agree.
vote.
So,
All in favor?
all in favor of the motion on the floor to accept the
It was to accept the amended number.
Yes.
Accept the amended number.
34, 196, 468.
That was 15 minutes ago.
Thank you.
Whatever.
That motion carries unanimously. All right, warrant Article 11, Sanborn Ice Hockey Team.
Make a motion to recommend.
I'll second it.
It's a motion by Tammy, second by Nancy Ross. Any questions or comments? Okay. All in favor of supporting the amended? Okay, that's 6-4. Those opposed? There's one. Motion carries 6-1. 6-1. All right. Capital improvements to Swayze and Chase Fields. This was amended on the floor. And the funds in the amount of $1. Do I have a-
Second.
Yeah, it's a motion by Nancy, second by Jan. Any further discussions relative to Article 12?
Yes, I do. My concern is $1, and I think it's important that people realize that they are approving an appropriation. And even though it's $1, if it passes, this board has the authority to do this. There are always change orders. And the example I'm going to use, let's say we're going to tear out this wall, and we have a $10,000 number for that. And as they get into it, they find out there's a beam up there with all kinds of carpenter ants. We're not tied to the $10,000. We're tied to an appropriation to do something. Right? So people must realize that by $1, and whichever way they want to go, they are appropriating an amount of money to do a project. The school board would have the authority to do the project and not, well, I was voting against it for $1 because I know you couldn't do it. Wrong, okay? So as long as they go into this with their eyes open, I'm very happy. With all of these that are $1, so I'm not repeating myself.
Yep.
I just wanted to add that, Mr. Broderick, you speak true. But when we were having the discussion about what we were going to do and whatnot as a board, we had decided we weren't going to go forward with anything other than the two that we did go forward with. But with this being at $1, God forbid, we have to do something. If this is approved, we can do it.
Absolutely.
So-
And there's a new board
It's
next
a
year,
good
so who knows, you know. But I just want the people to realize that if they vote for this, they don't think that, well, it's only $1, so they really can't do it.
True that.
You know.
I also want people to realize that the board,
Well, this board
well, this
did.
sitting board
Yeah.
didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
They didn't put it on the warrant because we had decided only
See, I
two,
voted-
so
I
we would
voted for
have something that we could present to the public.
I was the one vote, I think, on this one. Yeah.
Okay.
A
All right,
voice in the
other further
wilderness.
discussions for Article 12? Yes, Dr. Brown?
I have a comment about Article 12, and this applies to Article 13 as well.
Mhm.
So So comments were made at the budget hearing and at the deliberative describing Articles 12 and 13 as malicious, cynical ploys, and as not a secret, since the CIP Capital Improvement Project Plan is posted on a website. These comments fail to acknowledge that a plan is not yet in action. Once a plan is decided, only a warrant signals to voters their input is now needed. Popular input cannot steer the proposed spending process without a warrant being placed on the ballot. A pending decision is in fact secret if the public does not know a plan is about to be placed into action and a specific expenditure decision made. I ran on a school board platform that we choose a capital plan, but the voters should make the final decision. Our school board approved plans for almost $10 million in building renovations. These plans are contained in the CIP plan recently approved by the school board. Oddly, a majority on our board voted no on approving the first two capital improvement projects, the warrants for Swayze Chase and Middle School Bakey Memorial. The Budget Committee Chair voiced concern about the projects and asked for an overall plan for our deteriorating middle school, along with a 20-year bond to finance the $10 million investment over time. A majority of board members, however, have not acknowledged this proposal, nor publicly indicated they want or desire to explore such a revised plan. In light of this, why have these same board members voted no to recommend the two petition warrants representing the first two projects of their own CIP plan? Is it because the voters and not the board members are being given the opportunity to control the expenditure decisions? This odd vote coincides with many board members' receptiveness to the motion here to knock it down to $1 each at the deliberative. One board member who enjoyed the support of NKTA and agrees with BudCom Chair Annie Collier, yours truly, endorses a delay in these expenditures, but we both supported placing these capital items before the voters. There are good arguments for delaying these projects, Collier and I agree, but voters should decide. Where is the school board's vigorous defense of its own CIP 5-year plan, and why the initial not recommended vote on ostensibly urgent projects itemized in their own CIP plan? Members of the board need to support their own CIP plan and convince the voters as to why they should vote yes, or acknowledge that the BudCom chair and a minority on the board are correct about the need to revisit our middle school plan and create a bond affordable to voters. A yes vote on the altered $1 warrants returns control of capital decisions to 7 school board members and the superintendent. The reality appears to be they do not want the voters involved in the decisions at all, but would prefer to spend and tax another $10 million over 5 years without the need to ask voter approval of these capital projects. Thank you.
Ms. Ross has her hand up.
Yes, Ms. Ross.
It really bothers me when people assume to think they know why I vote the way I vote, but I didn't want to approve those articles as they were originally put on there for a number of reasons. One, I think it was extremely confusing to the public. Number two, we as a board decided yes, it was a plan, but what do we think the voters could afford? We felt that the two we put on there were what the voters could afford. If the voters approve the articles, again, as they are, we're not taking anything away from them. All that approval of the vote is doing is allowing us, again, should we need to do anything within these number 12 and 13 warrants, we can go ahead and do it. It's not the intent of the board to go ahead and do that. If those were approved, which I doubt they would have been, although stranger things have happened, that would have been more of a burden on the taxpayer. So to think that by putting those two warrants on those two articles on the warrant, that you were giving the people a choice, I don't really think there was any choice at all, because I sure wouldn't vote for it as a taxpayer, considering all of the other things that were on the warrant. So as a board member, and the board members who voted against them when they had that high dollar on them, it was because we were being prudent and thoughtful in what we thought the voter could afford.
And we've spent time, a whole hour, 2 hours at least, painstakingly going over what as a board, we wanted to bring forward in warrant articles because of the other priorities we have to come forward to the voters with this year. And that was the rationale. And the petition warrant articles were set up, I think, to try and sabotage other things. That's my opinion. So.
Yes, Mr. Broderick.
Again, I was the voice in the wilderness here. I'll tell you why I voted for this, and I truly agree that I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Why did I vote the other way then? We spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of man-hours making a capital improvement account, our plan. We came here, we looked at it, we sent it back for revisions. It's our plan. And I thought, I hate to use the word hypocritical, but it was, it's our plan. We're saying we need these things, and they were saying, but we're not going to vote for it. And I just saw a dichotomy there that it was our plan. How do we get credibility later on when we say we absolutely need these things, when we say, well, we need these, but don't vote for it? So I had a real tug of war that if I'm going to keep my credibility and say, we need these things on the capital improvement plan, how can I then say, but don't vote for them, or we're not for them? And I have no problem with anybody's vote. They're going to vote the way they want. Again, I was the only one that voted against it because I just thought there was a bit of a credibility thing here when we spent all that time and all that treasure, as they use the term today, and then we say, but we really don't want it. Well, why did we do it to begin with? That was my feeling. Yeah.
You have a comment?
I do.
I'm going on.
And that's okay. I don't follow what you're saying.
No, and I hear you,
Yeah.
but the little piece that you're missing from that is the history. Because we've had plans year after year after year, and we have it in there, and it's in the budget.
Yep.
And what happens year after year after year? We don't do those projects that we have set for that year because we don't have the money. So this year, we said, okay, let's do it, we be preemptive, and take them, we put it out there, we have the plan, but each year we're going to do something in that plan. We put forth what we thought we could do this year, because inevitably, if we had put the whole thing out there, we weren't going to do it anyway.
Absolutely agree.
So there's no dichotomy.
Wait, say that
no
again.
Well, let the
contradictory
people
there.
decide, is
If
what
we
I'm
put
saying.
the whole thing
No.
out there,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's how I felt.
It's a common mentality.
so, Mr. Does everyone remember how much year one, first year projects?
Yeah, it's like $1.2 million, right?
How-
1.2 million?
1.271,
Yeah.
$1,271,690. Comment being, did you come to the table with Mr. Broderick, with a CIP recommendation for a warrant article for $1.2 million?
I don't understand.
Did you, by voting in and acknowledging that we adopted a feasibility study that made recommendations that things that we need to look for down the road?
Yeah, we approved that.
We approved the feasibility study saying you need to take care of these things down the road.
Right. That's what this warrant article's saying.
No. What I'm asking you now is, we approved a feasibility study, not for one that we need to go ahead and do day one. Because in year one, there is a recommendation by this feasibility study.
You want to kick the can down the road to next year for twice that amount? See, this lets the people decide. That's all I'm saying.
But where was your motion on the floor for $1.27 million warrant article? You didn't come to, when we were discussing on December 7th and the following meeting.
Right.
Because December 7th is when we approved that CIP project.
Because there was already a school board warrant on that, which I voted for.
No, there was
and then
not.
we took it off because there was this petition.
Not
You're talking
saying.
before that, when we were trying to decide.
When we were deciding.
What are warrant articles we wanted to propose as a committee to
Right.
go forward to address the CIP. We decided as a board, 2.
Right, 2 of them, which totaled almost $1 million.
We did not, Mr. Broderick.
Yeah, we,
No, just Swayze and.
They were like $320-some thousand.
this one,
Apologize, but I'm trying to.
No, those were
My
not.
point being.
but we had similar ones. Remember, they were almost exact?
We had 2, they had 4. 2 of them were similar. The other 2 were what we had not voted on, and those are the 2 we're
Shouldn't have to
talking
teach
about.
them this.
Those were never ours. They were not.
The point, what I really want to hear is, we put forth, and
It doesn't matter, you know?
It does matter,
doesn't-
because your
No,
article...
this is my vote. I voted the way I wanted.
Well,
It doesn't matter. I'm outvoted anyway.
It matters to me, right, as us as a board, we as a board chose not to put $1.2 million in warrant articles out there. Because we knew what, and something you just said moments ago, that the community couldn't
That's your
afford.
reasoning.
You just
I
said
gave
it.
you my reasoning, you've got your reasoning, fine, move the motion.
Well-
Don't question me why I go this way and what did I do then and this and that. I gave you my reasons why I voted for it. Move on.
Point being, Mr.
That's the
Broderick,
problem, we get so darn personal.
I'm not. All right.
When did you know and when did you do it? You know, or whatever it was that they brought up again the other day about Nixon.
All right.
The board, I feel, there's a discussion a lot about how the board feels about the voters' opinions, and I think that the voters know what they want, they can vote on what they want, that's fine. But on the topic of hypocrisy of the school board, I think that I would agree with you had this been a warrant article submitted by the school board. But this was specifically talking about recommending versus not recommending a petition warrant article that petitioners were discussing about capital improvement plans that the board approved. So I feel like this is not entirely apples and oranges, but I feel like there's red apples and green apples here. It's not completely.
But we're required to put a recommendation, Mike.
I know,
Okay.
but the vote was not to recommend a foreign warrant article. If the board had put forth a warrant article and then voted to not recommend it, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. But I feel like there was a petition article that was a cause of retraction from the school board, that you guys retracted a warrant article that you had put forth because there was essentially the same thing, but there was a change in the vocabulary. And I think that's what, from my understanding of the conversation that was had the night that this was recommended versus not recommended, I think that was a topic of concern for people.
Okay.
All right. Motion.
Move along.
All right. Let's go ahead and move the motion at this point in time. All in favor for the modified Article 12?
Wait a minute.
All in favor?
You've got all in favor of not recommending?
Recommend, not recommend
All in
by
favor?
the Sanborn
Okay.
Regional School District. Are you in favor or
Favor
favor?
recommending Article 12.
When recommend,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
in favor of
All in
recommending.
favor of recommending, not recommend. Okay? Those not in favor, not recommending?
Yeah, I
Okay.
picked up a vote.
All right, Article 13, I'd like to go ahead and ask for a motion to
I move Article 13 as written.
To recommend?
To
recommend.
recommend Article 13 as written.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll recommend. So that's Nancy, one
That's
second. Okay.
fine.
Any further discussion? I think we just kind of beat this one with the prior one.
We've already done it.
Okay. All in favor to recommend Article 13? It's 5-4. Those opposed? Okay. All right. Let's
Realize you just took a vote to recommend.
We did.
to
So you're
recommend.
recommending $1, okay.
We're recommending the appropriation,
That's an appropriation.
Right.
so we don't keep kicking it down the road in the
Okay.
event that we don't have to. Unfinished business, we're done with that. Deliberative session, new business, we don't have anything this evening underneath new business.
Nope.
Communications received sent,
Yes. At the second, by school board policy, at the second board meeting in February, the board needs to set the graduation date for this year. So in your board packets, I believe, is a letter from Mr. Stack regarding graduation this year. As of yesterday, we've had 4 snow days, and based on district practice, the last day for underclassmen would be Friday, June 16th. So at this point, we're recommending a graduation date of June 9th. That would be the earliest that we could do it. If we have one more snow day, then we're bouncing it to the following Friday,
Thank
which
you.
would be June 16th.
drive careful, Jim.
You'd push it out a week?
Yeah.
What's that?
You would push it out a week?
Well,
Friday,
sure, because
next
we
Friday.
would,
This students
It's
go to
only-
school that?
On the Friday.
Right. So would the seniors go to school that extra week? Because they're 4 days? Historically, the seniors kind of got a pass.
Right, and that's
you know.
that's all in the letter.
Yeah, okay,
So,
all right.
They have senior week.
Yeah, they have
They would
senior
have senior
activities.
week and all their.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying, they kind of got a pass,
So
you know.
depending on the weather, as I'm sitting here in the background watching the storm come through.
Hasn't started?
Depending on the weather, which is a
We, you know, if we have another snow day, now, keeping in mind that Friday, June 16th, that's also Father's Day weekend, which is a big weekend for people.
Barbecue.
I always thought Mother's Day.
Motorcycle
was
weekend
Father's Day.
and all those things, so, Father's Day. So, you know, that didn't necessarily impact our decision, but certainly Brian lays it out pretty clearly there. So, I
Okay.
would ask that the board set a tentative date of June 9th with the understanding that I may need to move it back to the 16th if we have more snow days.
let's hope that doesn't happen, because I, for one, have already been invited to about 2 graduation parties during that week, so it wouldn't make sense if we already graduated, or hadn't graduated yet.
Do you want a motion?
Motion,
I'll second it.
motion by Jan, second by Nancy. Any further discussions other than we're figuring out where Mike's gonna be at his graduation party so we can hang out?
You can come to mine.
All right.
The entire
All right,
board.
all in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. All right. I'd just like to say that ultimately with the challenge of infighting, culture, what have you, I think there's a testament to all that by the amount of letters that we've received about several members of the leadership team tendering their resignation. We should be concerned, cognizant, and aware of that. We can't have increasing scores if we have decreasing team members who are taking their skills elsewhere.
I'm confused. Are there more in the leadership team that we have
We have
not
two
been aware of?
principals at both elementaries, that's all we need to say, think of it that way.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so, but they're retiring, right? One's
One
retiring,
of them was never permanently
Let's not
hired.
speak
and
out of
one was
turn.
only a one-year term.
It's not, let's not,
Interim.
Well,
yeah,
the,
Am I right?
the person before that took his talents elsewhere.
correct.
No, isn't one retiring?
Mr. Vanderell was left last year, and he was.
Yeah, but that's there, but his replacement was a one-year position.
Interim, correct.
Okay,
But
and the
then
other
there's
person's
another school.
retiring.
They're leaving the district.
They're leaving
Yeah.
the district.
Retiring from here.
From here. It's not, so, okay.
Nice
we-
package to retire on that. I did.
We don't have any other written information this evening. The agenda items are next school board meeting, March 8th. Kind of feel like we should keep that one open right now. I'd like to keep that open because we have a couple of meetings now that we've just inserted between now and then. So let's keep that agenda open, if you don't mind.
We're at 6:30 next,
Yeah,
no,
so-
was it 6:30?
So I'm going to move on to announcements then, which
Yeah,
will get to
okay.
your answer. So next, we've got now to update this. The Sanborn Regional School District will be having their public hearing next Wednesday at 6:30 at the Sanborn Regional Middle School. Prior to that, the Sanborn Regional School District will be, as part of the principal search for Newton Memorial Elementary, we'll be meeting at Memorial School.
Doesn't really matter.
We might move that to the middle school so we could be there, and yes, yeah. So
Move
we're
the,
gonna, the principal search meeting forum,
I thought that was for the public.
Why don't you move
It
the
is.
public forum to
Public-
the memorial?
We have to be there?
we need to be, we should be at both, yeah.
The hearing, the public,
Yeah.
this public hearing on this warrant article has already been legally
Yeah.
posted. That has to be at the middle.
Right, we have to
That's
be at
the-
that one.
The
Yeah. Can we have the
the
memorial?
public forum for the principal search, not everybody needs to be there, no.
Okay,
That's a public.
Right, but we
Right.
should probably have it at the middle school anyway.
I'll be out there.
I mean, that's where this is, makes kind of sense.
All right, so
No?
next
I have it
Wednesday, the
tomorrow.
22nd, there will be a Memorial Elementary School principal search with a location to be announced at 5:30
With pizza.
with pizza. Parents and students are welcomed.
Right.
We have subsequently the same evening, our Newton public hearing for Article 14 at the Memorial Middle School, middle school at 6:30. Furthermore, on the prior day, the 21st, we have our Bakey Elementary. Parents and students are welcome from 5:30 to 6:30 over at Bakey Elementary. Again, for the that's next Tuesday. So for Tuesday, the 21st, parents and students are welcome to Bakey Elementary. Bakey Elementary for public forum. You know, what do you want in your next principal?
The public is welcome.
That's
It is-
public.
the
The
public
public
is
is, the
welcome.
public
Public.
is welcome.
Public is
Public is
welcome.
definitely welcome.
Yes.
But parents and students
Who's
are
on first?
encouraged to come.
True Sam.
And then there's also
Need cold medicine.
comment via the web.
Yes. And then same thing goes for the next day at Newton.
Do we have a non-public?
Yes, we do. All right. And then post that, the next SRSD school meeting will be March 8th. The second voting session is March 14th. I'd like to go ahead and
Agenda items for next meeting.
exit our regular
Can-
session.
Agenda items for
I
next
just-
meeting?
Michael, you can email me past, honestly.
Okay,
Please,
Yeah, let's leave it open.
all right.
please, if you don't mind.
I just.
Just because of the timing of some,
I say it every meeting.
Public
How long is
comment.
time I got out there?
Two.
I'd like to go ahead.
Just harassing it.
I mean, we have people that are here with us from 7 to sometimes 11 o'clock
Michael.
at night.
Non-public session, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to exit the regular meeting.
I'll make a motion to enter into non-public under RSA 91.
We have to, wait, time, we have to close the public hearing
Yeah.
first,
Oh.
right.
please.
Is there any more comments?
I'll make
And
a
is there any
motion to
further
close.
comments? Cheryl? All right,
Bless you.
You
okay.
make a public
So
comment
close
to
the public hearing at 10:05, please.
Second.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and exit the regular meeting at 10:05.
Okay.
That's,
Is that two votes?
all right, and let's enter into non-public.
I'll make a motion to enter into non-public under RSA 91-A:3,
Want to do these home?
Roman numeral 2A.